And so the people can stop the water from wicking on day one, not find out what it did on day three. I'm sorry. That kind of thing.
Town of Nags says Board of Commissioners meeting for March, please come to order. Let's begin our meeting with a moment of silence this morning. Pledge allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. A motion for the adoption of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Second, the agenda be adopted, or is there any discussion? Not all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, like sign, and so ordered. It's time for our audience response. I would ask that you would hold your comments to 5 minutes, and if your comments are pertaining to a public hearing that we have later in the agenda, I'd ask you to hold those comments until we get to that point in the agenda. Then anyone like to speak this morning? Yeah, go ahead.
Good morning, Mayor, Commissioners. Mark Cornwell, 7532 Cedar Island Drive on the Causeway. I'm here to address one of the items on your agenda, Old Business H, Item 1, under Board, Committee, and Policy. And specifically, it speaks to, you have a change on page 4 under the item of removal. And it states the town governing board may remove any member of any town established committee if absent 3 consecutive meetings without just excuse. First, I would like to make sure that that language also applies to boards, specifically the planning board. It only mentions committees, but I believe that that policy should pertain to boards. And secondly, I believe that 3 is too many, at least in regard to the planning board. Because a member would be allowed to miss 3 meetings, which is 25% of an annual meeting load. And then if the board were to decide to terminate that member, and then it would be another month at least, and possibly 2 months before you make a selection and get another member to the board. My recommendation is that number should be 2. I believe that after 2 missed meetings, it should be up to you to decide whether that. And again, that would still be 3 or possibly 4 meetings where we would be without a planning board member. And the last thing that I would bring up is regard to payment. There is a stipend, if you will, that board members get. I believe that if you miss a meeting, that you should not get that stipend. And my rationale is this: if a board member is going to attend a meeting, or you're expected to review all of the information that comes in the packet, you're prepared to come to discuss the issue before us, and you're prepared to vote. If you're not going to attend that meeting, the likelihood of, since we have no proxy, the likelihood of a member not attending, doing that, doesn't happen. In my mind, I realize it's a nominal amount of money, but that's my justification. You're expected to perform, and if you can't, then I don't think you should get the stipend. And I understand there are circumstances where board members have to meet, but I believe that that's just, it's just not money well spent.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark. Are there others that would like to speak to the board this morning? See no other hands, so we'll declare audience response closed. I have an item of recognition this morning, a very fine award for Shane Height, and we'll ask Chief Zork if he'll come and present that.
Very good. Good morning, Mayor, Board. It's my pleasure today to congratulate Deputy Fire Chief and Town Safety Officer Shane Height for recently achieving the title of Manager of Environmental Safety and Health. MESH is sponsored by the Safety and Health Council of NC, NC State University, and the North Carolina Department of Labor. And this privilege is only awarded to those who demonstrate achievement through considerable education in the safety and health field. As we all know, the town of Nags Head relies heavily on our safety program. Deputy Chief Height has held a leadership role as the safety officer for many years now. He's done an excellent job. We rely on this program to reduce on-the-job injuries and property loss caused by occupational incidents, and it's been going very, very well due to Shane's diligence. He's worked hard with staff to keep the town worksite safe, improve employee protection, and increase municipal productivity through his participation in the MESH program. I commend and recognize his involvement in this ongoing effort as it increases his value to the town and to all the employees who directly benefit by going home every day to their families safe and sound. Very good.
Amy, thank you so much for all the efforts, and this is certainly a great award, and we look forward to your continued work in these areas. Thank you for your help.
Yes, sir.
Thought he was going to make a speech.
We have two proclamations this morning. First is in support of Relay for Life. And Paint the Town Purple Days.
That's right, Kansas State.
And it reads, American Cancer Society, Paint the Town Purple proclamation for Nags Head, North Carolina. Whereas Paint the Town Purple is an activity of the American Cancer Society that promotes cancer awareness, gives individuals and communities an opportunity to fight back against the cancer. And whereas money raised during Paint the Town Purple of Nags Head Days supports the American Cancer Society mission of saving lives and creating a world with less cancer and more birthdays, by helping people stay well, by helping people get well, and by finding cures for cancer and by fighting back. And whereas the American Cancer Society funded more than $150 million in cancer research last year through money raised in communities across the United States. Therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Commissioners of the Town of Nags Head, North Carolina, do hereby proclaim April 1st, 2015 to May 2nd, 2015 as Paint the Town Purple Days. In Nags Head, North Carolina, encourage citizens to help finish the fight against cancer by participating in the Paint the Town Purple activities April 1st through May 2nd. This is the fourth day of March 2015. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion moved and second. In discussion. All in favor of approving the resolution as read, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, like sign, and there being none, it's so ordered. Our second resolution is support of Multiple Sclerosis Awareness Week. This was requested by Melanie Haig on behalf of Christine F. McGraw, President of the Greater Carolina Chapter of the National MS Society. 2015 Multiple Sclerosis Awareness Week. whereas multiple sclerosis is a neurological disease of the central nervous system affecting 2 million people worldwide, and each hour someone is newly diagnosed, and whereas the National Multiple Sclerosis Society Greater Carolina chapter reports that in our state more than 13,000 people are diagnosed with MS, and that the disease generally strikes people in the prime of their life between ages 20 and 50 and causes unpredictable effects in which the progression, severity, and specific symptoms cannot be foreseen, and the cause and cure for this often disabling disease remains unknown. And whereas the Multiple Sclerosis Society Greater Carolina chapter is committed to a world free of MS, heightening public knowledge about and insight into the disease, and whereas since 1946 the Multiple Sclerosis Society has been a driving force of MS research, relentlessly pursuing prevention, treatment, and a cure, and has invested more than $868 million in groundbreaking research, and whereas funds raised through the National Multiple Sclerosis Society fuel the efforts of nearly 380 research projects globally, totaling $50.6 million annually at the best medical centers, universities, and other institutions throughout the United States and abroad. Because of this, MS research has never been more hopeful than it is today. And whereas discovering the cause, finding a cure, and preventing future generations from being diagnosed with MS is an important task that all Americans and North Carolinians should support. And whereas the town of Nags, head of the state of North Carolina, recognizes the importance of finding the cause and cure of MS, a chronic and often devastating disease, and expresses its appreciation and admiration for the dedication that the National Multiple Sclerosis Society Greater Carolina chapter has shown towards the future of MS. Now, therefore, the Nags Head Board of Commissioners, by virtue of the authority vested by the Constitution and the laws of the great state of North Carolina, does hereby proclaim March 2nd through the 8th, 2015 as MS Awareness Week, and we do commend this observance to all of our citizens. All North Carolinians are encouraged to learn more about multiple sclerosis and what they can do to support individuals with MS and their families. Do we have a motion to accept this proclamation?
So moved.
Moved and second. Any discussion? Not all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, like sign, there being none, so therefore it's ordered. Next item is the consent agenda. Do we have a motion to accept the consent agenda?
So moved.
Motion made to accept the consent agenda. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, like sign. There being none, so ordered. Next item on the agenda is item F, public hearing to consider amendments to the zoning ordinance relating to fishing piers within the R2 medium density residential zoning district. Mr. Lighthead, I ask you to open that public hearing here.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. At this time, we will begin the public hearing to consider the zoning ordinance text amendment to Town Code Section 48-403C3 as it pertains to fishing piers within the R2 medium-density residential zoning district. To begin the public hearing, we will receive the staff's analysis presented by Andy Garman.
Kelly called me this morning to apologize for missing the meeting today. She is ill. She was going to present this item, but she just wanted to convey that to the board. This ordinance deals with regulations pertaining to fishing piers within the R2 zoning district. As you recall, from the February meeting, the Board of Commissioners adopted an ordinance to regulate fishing piers within the CR zoning district, which includes the Jeanette's Pier and the Nags Head Pier. However, since that regulation just dealt with CR, it did not extend to the Outer Banks Pier, which is in the R2 district. The board at that time suggested that the planning board also look at regulations to pertain to the Outer Banks Pier and the R2 district to make regulations for fishing piers consistent town-wide. So what we've done here is we've prepared the ordinance, carrying over some of those items from the ordinance you saw in February, primarily dealing with the amount of square footage and customer service area that a fishing pier can have in a restaurant. As you recall, that was 1,500 square feet. That has been included in the ordinance. We've also clarified fishing piers can include accessory, retail, and restaurant uses. Other provisions are very similar to what was in the ordinance you saw last month, dealing with lighting, the height of the structure, and lot coverage. There were a few things dealing with off-site wastewater and parking in the CR district that we did not carry over to this ordinance, since it also specified that those things had to be located in a commercial district. Since this is a residential district, we didn't feel like those were appropriate to include here. So essentially what you have before you is the ordinance that was requested last month. The planning board did review it and agreed to approve it as presented, and that's our presentation.
All right, any questions for Mr. Garman? All right, thank you very much, Andy. Next, anything from the planning board on this?
I have nothing to add to Andy's presentation unless you have questions for me.
Any questions for Mr. Cornwell? All right, thank you very much, sir. Would any member of the public like to comment on this proposed zoning ordinance text amendment? If so, this is your opportunity. Does the board wish to receive any further information from staff regarding this matter before you deliberate on it? All right, if not, this will conclude the public hearing on this matter, and the board may begin its deliberations on this zoning ordinance text amendment.
Any discussions or comments? We'll start with you, Mr. Demers. Anything this morning?
Just as a confirmation of my understanding of this, there's no negative impact of any of these changes on the pier in R2. Is that correct?
Yeah, yes, that is correct. We did discuss that when we talked about the previous ordinance. These ordinances were drafted so that they wouldn't make any of the piers non-conforming with respect to their customer service areas. So it would just place a maximum limit up to which they could go.
Thank you. That was my only concern.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Walters, anything this morning?
No, I support this. I think it puts everyone in line, everybody on the same page.
Same page, good. Commissioner Kennedy?
No, sir, no questions. Thank you.
Commissioner Ratzenberger?
I'm fine.
Do we have a motion?
Move that we approve the proposal as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion's moved and second. Any discussion? Not all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, like sign. There being none, so ordered. Next public hearing is to consider text amendments to the town parking ordinance. Mr. Lighty, if you would open that public hearing for us, please.
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. At this time, we'll begin the public hearing to consider various modifications to the town's parking ordinance. This would modify sections 48-162, 3A, 3B, 4, and 48-167. At this time, we'll begin with the presentation of the staff's analysis presented by Andy Garden.
So we have additional revisions to the town's parking ordinance that were requested by the board when the board held its public hearing on this in January. This was a comprehensive review of the parking ordinance, dealing with a variety of sections of the ordinance, not only residential standards, commercial standards. One of the primary things the ordinance accomplishes is reducing a lot of the parking standards and refining the standards for a lot of the commercial uses in the town. What the committee found was that a lot of the commercial uses could be reduced, and the feeling was that some of the uses were overparked based on previous town standards. The Board of Commissioners, during its public hearing, asked for changes to the ordinance and sent it back to the Planning Board. Those changes dealt primarily with the residential standard. Previously, the committee had recommended and the Planning Board had recommended 1 parking space per bedroom. Then it was refined to N-1 for houses 4 bedrooms or less, and 1 parking space per bedroom for houses 5 bedrooms or greater. The Board of Commissioners chose to request that that standard remain as is, which would be the number of bedrooms minus 2, with a minimum of 2 parking spaces for all single-family dwellings. The ordinance now reflects that standard. The Board of Commissioners also asked for changes, clarifications dealing with the acceptable types of pavement materials that could be used in residential applications. Previously, the ordinance left the determination up to the town engineer. Now the ordinance references manufacturer specifications and acceptable methods for pavement design. This was a suggestion by the town engineer. We believe it meets the intent that the commissioners were trying to achieve with that. There was a standard dealing with reinforced turf products as alternative parking surfaces. Language has been suggested by the town engineer to also clarify when you would have to replace a turf reinforced parking surface. Previously, the feeling based on the language was that you might install a turf reinforced product, and then prior to even a CO, you might be asked to replace it if it wasn't functioning. That has been clarified. Now, after it's been installed and in operation for a period of years, if it's no longer functioning, the town could ask for that to be replaced. One specific change brought up by the planning board when they re-reviewed it was taxi and limousine service. They have recommended a change to that basically requires a number of parking spaces based on the number of service vehicles being used and the number of office employees that are at the business. Some additional changes were made dealing with references to the parking standard required for single-family dwellings in the village at Nags Head, and also the parking standard that is now applicable to fishing piers based on the ordinances we've just adopted dealing with fishing piers has been included in this, so that will carry forward when you adopt this ordinance. The planning board voted on this at their January meeting, recommended 5-0 approval of the ordinance, and the ordinance is here for your consideration.
Okay. Are there any questions for Mr. Garman? None? All right. Thank you very much, Andy. Mr. Cornwell, anything from the planning board on this?
I have nothing to add.
All right. Are there any questions for Mr. Cornwell before we proceed? All right. Thank you, sir. Does any member of the public wish to comment on this proposed zoning ordinance text amendment? Does the board wish to receive any further information about this before you begin your deliberations? No. All right. At this time, we will conclude the public hearing on this matter, and the board may begin its deliberations to consider this proposed zoning ordinance text amendment.
Any discussion? Commissioner Ratzenberger, if you have anything.
Why'd you look at me like that? You saw my little red flag. Okay, I'm happy. I have a reservation, but I'm not gonna hold anything up about stacking, particularly in the village. Okay. The way it's written here, I'm still not comfortable, and that's, what is that, Bowlegs 8? 48, I'm on page 6, 48-162, Bowlegs 8, which is on page 6. Yeah, stacking in the drive, let me be sure I don't confuse everybody like I did last time. Stacking in the drive aisle. Given the lot shapes, lot coverage, and a lot of other issues there, it's conceivable that a home in the village could violate this, because and it may be in the planning phase it's okay, but in the usage phase it's not. And I'll take my home for example. As a resident, I have 2 garages, so I can fit everybody in. I meet the ordinance. But if I were a rental owner and that were a rental home and the garages were closed off, more than likely, then I could not fit 3 rental vehicles and still be in compliance with this thing. So now, admittedly, all we do is go by the house plans, and we don't care how many we stack up. But still, I want to wait till something comes up, but I just want to make everybody aware. I think there's still some issues with that, but it's not enough to slow anything up. So that was my only comment.
Thank you, Mr. Ratzenberger. Commissioner Cahoon, do you have anything this morning?
No, sir.
Mayor Pro Tem?
I would just like to say I understand Commissioner Ratzenberger's concern, and particularly in just the enforcement. I think it's not enforceable truly, so.
Right, that,
Anyway.
yeah, my example's a bad one, but it happens throughout. Yeah.
But other than that, you know,
Okay.
I'm happy with the ordinance.
Commissioner Demers, you've got some skin in this game.
I'm happy with the ordinance as it stands. I think there's a lot that went into it. I think it's good. I like the changes that were incorporated here at the end, with only one reservation, kind of take Commissioner Ratzenberger's approach. I don't have a problem with it, but I am a little concerned about the N-2, particularly in specific cases where maybe you have a subdivision being developed, both sides of the street, several houses very close together, 4 and 5 bedrooms with only 2 or 3 parking spaces. I'm afraid in that situation, parking may become a problem, but I'm willing to go ahead and support the ordinance as it's been revised and see how well it works.
Thank you. I want to compliment the parking committee that spent so many hours on this ordinance, and the planning board. I think you've done a tremendous job of improving a major problem that we had created over the years, and the problem had been created because we were, as a board, being very conservative on parking places, parking spots, and the tendency was to overpave the areas in Nags Head, and I think this ordinance has corrected that. I know a lot of energy and a lot of effort went into it, and I'm in agreement with the ordinance now as it was presented this morning. Any other discussion? Yes, sir.
I'd like to add one, kind of piggyback on what you said. It's not just planning staff and planning board that did an excellent job, but Public Works was heavily involved, and so were a lot of citizens in the town through the numerous meetings that we've had. And this has to go down, I think, as one of the better discussed ordinance changes, huge ordinance change we've had in decades here in the town. And I also want to thank everybody, particularly staff, and the planning board too, for the manner in which they have collected all the information, laid it out in a logical manner, and presented it to us each meeting as a readily understandable update from the last piece of information we saw. That's the only reason we were actually able to get through this thing. And I certainly hope that's not a skill that was lost after we approve this thing, that we keep it up for everything else. This has been tremendous, and I think we as a town have learned quite a bit from this change. This thing makes me really happy, not just for the content of the ordinance, but for what the maturity we showed and how this was done, and the product and the process that came with it. So.
The process meant a lot, and with a lot of people involved, and a lot of hard work, and I think the end product is an excellent end product.
Thank you for letting me say that.
Do we have a motion?
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the ordinance as presented.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Not all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, like sign, being none, so ordered. I want to thank planning staff and planning board, and particularly the parking committee, for all the great work, Mark.
Mr. Mayor, could I add a comment on, there's a provision for getting major revisions to ordinances almost immediately published in the Municode process by paying a very minimal amount, I think is about $35. If we don't do that, it can take 9 to 12 months for that to be published in Municode. And even though it's available at the town, if somebody specifically asks, it's much better if it's available on the Municode for anybody who's on the net. And so I'd like to propose that the staff look at paying that minimal amount and getting this published quickly.
You'd like to make that as a motion?
I would like to make that as a motion, yes, sir.
I'll second that motion.
Second to the motion. Any discussion?
Yeah, is this 9 to 12 months? I thought 6 months. I mean, is it that long for stuff we do?
Stormwater took from January to September.
That's,
If they stack them up, when they get to 6, they put them in, is that right?
Right.
So it could, depending on how
we
busy
on
and
the
active.
free, are we on the free version of this, and if we pay them a few bucks a month, we get to the one that they, I mean, that's ridiculous. We have this, and we ought to be able to see it within, to me, 60 to 90 days, our
Right.
code ought to be
They'll
up
put
to
it out
date.
there for that.
Pardon?
What Commissioner Demers said, they'll put it out there for $35.
Right.
It won't be within the code, but it will be out on the site.
We'll start doing that. It'll be on Municode.
Right.
We'll start paying that fee to get it on Municode as quickly as possible.
But it won't be in the code itself?
It won't be in your
Not
hard.
immediately.
Not
It
the
won't be-
hard one?
Right.
But-
It'll be
but-
online immediately.
Online immediate, so I could go to, I'd like to amend Commissioner Demers' little motion there, say we just make that SOP. We're gonna hit the budget in a couple of months, let's find our $360 or whatever we might need to get the code up to date and current.
All right, there's a amendment on the floor. Is there a second to the amendment?
Can I second my, can I?
Yeah, you would second that amendment.
I'll second that. I think it's a great idea.
Okay, any discussion on the amendment? All right, let's vote on the amendment, and that would be that we pay the fees to publish our ordinance changes to Unicode website immediately. Is there any discussion on that motion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. And now that we go to the motion, which would be the publishing to Unicode, our ordinances to Unicode as motion amended. Is any discussion on that? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. And it's so ordered. Got through that one. Next item on the agenda is the reports and recommendation from the Planning Board and the Planning and Development Director, presentation of an RFP for a land use plan revision project. Holly, you're up this morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm happy to present to you an update on our comprehensive land use plan update and code revision. I'm going to start by taking a step back and looking at where we started with this project initiation. So this discussion, I believe, started with this board last budget year in prepping for our budget, and the board identifying the need to address inconsistencies in our code. And so looking at reviewing and updating that, and in the 2014-2015 budget, there was $80,000 budgeted for this project. Staff began meeting with the board in the fall to do individual meetings to gain a better understanding and knowledge of the specific inconsistencies or the scope of the work that we would be looking at. And staff went on to present a presentation at your board retreat, and after hearing the needs from the board, staff felt it may be good to not only look at a code revision, but look at a land use plan update, that there were some policy issues as well. So we left the board, the presentation to the board at the retreat in January with homework. And our homework was to look at what this process for moving forward would be, what are other communities doing, how are they handling it, talk to some consultants, and come up with a game plan for how to move forward. Briefly, I'm going to summarize for the public and the board again what those discussions entailed and what you guys identified as a board as being needs. So there was concern about correcting inconsistencies in the code, and that would be different definitions for different chapters, just incorrect references to different sections of the code. We want to improve clarity. That was just mostly addressing areas where there are continual questions or gray areas. We want to close up those loopholes. We want to modernize our language in the code. I'm going to show you a slide later that talks about the history of planning in Nags Head, and we have not had an entire code rewrite since we had our first ordinance adoption. So modernizing that language is just important to keeping up with current planning best management practices. Having the consistent terminology, and there were specific chapters that were just outdated. Our subdivisions, street standards, we wanted to look at bringing those up to date. And we wanted to have a third-party look. This was the board's desire to have a third-party look at this, our town development codes. Staff has began a list, and you'll see that outlined in the scope of services for what staff is identifying as needs. But sometimes an outside perspective can catch things that staff who are familiar with using the document maybe are not able to see. Several of the policy issues that were identified by the board in these discussions was cluster housing, the Pond Island, big box development, beach road development, commercial outdoor recreation overlay, and then just inconsistencies between our zoning districts and our existing uses. So the scope of work would look at trying to address those policy issues as well. It was also a concern that we had completed several major planning documents, which are policy documents, since the land use plan had been completed. And we feel like it would be really important to include these documents or the actions from the documents in our land use plan to make it more comprehensive and to really take a look at how we can best fiscally accomplish the actions in all of these plans, because there's a monetary value associated with that, and to readdress to what are the true needs of the community and how can we best, from a comprehensive perspective, how can we best move forward. So I'm going to quickly talk about planning in Nags Head and a little bit of the history, and thanks to Carolyn for helping me do a lot of research to find out some of these dates, and I spent some time digging in our library, which was very interesting. But I can say that Nags Head has a rich history in planning and has been, should be known for addressing progressive issues that are complex. And there are some municipalities in North Carolina that still don't have zoning. And we can say as a town that, you know, we had our first zoning ordinance back as far as 1962. So the first land development plan, which you see the picture on the right is a copy of the front of that document, was in 1964. The first subdivision ordinance in 1971, and our first CAMA-regulated land use plan in 1976. So planning as a whole is not anything that's new to Nags Head. And what I found interesting, this is copies out of the 1962 land development plan. So they did a survey to determine why people came, what you see on the left, what attracted them to this area, and on the right, you know, what did people primarily do. And so there were lots of really interesting graphics and survey information. But what I found most fascinating was that these were the objectives of the land use plan, and I have 1964, but it is 64, 1964. So these were the objectives of that planning document. And in reviewing the past land use plans since then, our vision for Nags Head is really not too far off from where we started in 1964. So if you can't read that, so the four objectives were to fight against natural erosion and inundation, to provide the type of facilities, both public and private, needed by both tourists and permanent residents in season and out, to establish a more functional relationship between different land uses, and to make marked improvement to community appearance. So we have a lot of the same similar issues, you know, that we started with in 1964 that we do today, and the town should be proud of all that they have accomplished in achieving those objectives over the years. And that, as you can see, the land use planning and zoning and addressing the needs are a process, and it's an evolution, and we peck away at it very slowly. So I just want to say, as we move into this effort, that re-embarking into a land use plan update and a code revision aren't necessarily going to solve all of our problems instantaneously. As you can see from our past history, it's been a slow process. But reassessing and taking a snapshot in time of where we are now and looking at our community needs, the population is different, the needs of the community are different, so it's important to stop where we are and reassess and move forward. But obviously, so far there's been the same underwriting vision of the town, and that the process will continue to be slow and incremental as we move forward. So our project scope of work, we envision doing this in a two-part process, first by updating our land use plan and then by updating our town development codes. So the LUP update might look at our major corridors, and so the policies that address these issues that you see. So beach road commercial uses, housing and accommodations. We want to take a look at our architectural standards. What are our policies about those now? And are they getting us to where we want to be with that? Are we happy with what we're seeing on the ground? Environmental issues. We want to take a look at sea level rise, water quality, shoreline management, and develop some of those foundational policies that will help drive our zoning ordinance as we move forward with that update. Take a look at recreation, how we provide community services, and public and private utilities. So we would envision moving from land use plan update into a code revision. And again, your land use plan would form the policy that would, policy foundations that would guide how we move forward with that rewrite. And I think one of the main things is just knowing that we needed a consolidated definitions chapter that would apply to all of our development regulations. And we would look at doing this not through individual chapters like we've done in the past, but moving into a unified development ordinance. Where all the development regulations are compressed into one ordinance, so to speak. Subdivision standards, streets, we would want to update our floodplain development ordinance, our code enforcement provisions, zoning, erosion control, building construction, and we want to look at the process at which people move through the boards and gain approval. So we want to look at how they submit, how staff reviews it, and how they gain approval. We would envision, this is the timeline, I guess, that we would look at using, and we would use a RFQ, RFP process, a combined effort. So based upon your approval today, if we gain that, then we would move forward with the release of an RFQ requesting firms' qualifications to address this type of project. And we would review the submittals that come in and then move into an invitation process for submitting further proposals, and that would be in March the 24th from firms about how they would address, the way in which they would address this type of project. So it would be a greater amount of detail that's very specific to our project, but the RFQ process would give us time to vet who is invited into the RFP process. We would envision making a decision and bringing that back to you at your May 6th meeting on a recommendation for a consulting firm to move forward with this type of project. We would hope to have interviews with the consultants that are selected to move forward with the RFP process in there as well, and that would happen in mid to late April. So in moving forward, our next steps would be to conduct this RFQ, RFP process to select some type of project consultant, gain your approval of that selection, and to get them under contract by the end of May. That's all I have for you today. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions, Lonnie? Yes.
I just have I don't have a question, I have a comment.
Right. Go ahead.
I would just like to thank you for this just laying out the steps for us. And it was really great to see the historical perspective. You're right, it really hasn't changed that much, so I think that's pretty incredible. This has been a 2-year process. It's been in the budget for a couple of years, and I'm excited to think that we're going to move forward, get those funds encumbered this year, and begin the work. So thank you.
Commissioner Ratzenberger?
I echo everything Susie said on that. And tremendous presentation there. Some of that that's worth a few little charts in the lobby sort of thing that kind of show what we do. And we really do have a long history of it. My one concern is that we've got it in the clutches here of the planning department. I keep hearing the word development. That code revision and all that is the whole ball of wax. That's taxi cab drivers, that's everything that we've got in the code is a review of the whole thing to get it cohesive. Let's not, the word development is nice, but it's not all of what the original goal, at least my opinion, was. The original goal was the whole thing.
Yeah, I think it's called a unified development ordinance. So.
Well, I think we need some clarification on that, because my understanding is this has kind of evolved to the development sections of the code.
A unified development ordinance usually is typically just ordinance regulations that are related to development. Some places still have a standalone code of ordinances that address other issues that you're talking about in taxi cab, regulation of other types of things outside of development regulations. We could vet that a little bit further and determine if that's your desire to how to incorporate that and how to work through that in this process as well. So,
speaking for myself, I have no problem with a UDO if the net of this whole thing becomes a UDO. As part of that revision, wonderful. However, but the rest of it gets its fair share also, because we need to, like you said, some of this is 50 years old, over 50 years old, and we need to take a look at all of it in the process. So I don't want the little stuff left out. And then at some point, we're done talking. I have a question about land use planning and CAMA that I'd like to ask.
I do have one other comment, too, that I'd like to add. As part of the process, once we get the contractor under contract, one of the first steps they're going to do is an entire assessment of our code. And we envision, in moving forward, that the board would gain a report back. Like there will be a deliverable that outlines what the findings of that assessment are. So where there are need for revision and updates specifically. And I think that how we move forward can be decided later, but we will have direction out of that code assessment about our entire code and how, what exactly we need to address and how that can be addressed.
So the option's still in the process to have the UDO done, and then the separate code of ordinances that we're used to with all the other language can also be looked at.
Yes, we can look at that as how to
That's
address
fine.
that.
Just don't want to lose the bubble.
Okay.
I have a comment. If you'll recall, some meetings ago, I talked about Currituck receiving an award from NOAA.
Right.
The lady at the podium was part of that development of that process and that code. So I think we've got somebody on staff that can proceed and know how to proceed.
Thank you.
You can tell that's the quality of the little briefing here.
Any other, yes, Commissioner?
And I agree with Commissioner Ratzenberger's opinion that the entire code needs to be reviewed and updated eventually, at least in my opinion. The reason that I started to feel more comfortable with this unified development code approach was, to me, that kind of segmented the overall project and made it a little bit more manageable, as well as probably a little more affordable to take that as the phase one. And I like your explanation that there'll be an initial overview analysis of the entire thing, but then we can make a decision on how to proceed. And I'm also comfortable with the initial direction that we would proceed with the Unified Development Code and then pick up the rest later as we can have time and money.
Right now, your scope for the RFP is the land use development plan and the development code, and the rest of the code is not part of what you have right now.
I think the way I had originally written it or drafted it has been that way, but if we need to adjust that, if that's the board's desire, then we can certainly adjust that to reflect that.
I think at budget time last year, that's what we were talking about, was a review of the entire code to make sure that all sections of the code agree. Is that, that was my understanding anyway. So
That was my understanding and was also part of my hesitation about supporting it because I thought it was such a massive undertaking, and I felt more comfortable with what was presented in this plan. Just for clarification, the Currituck project, was that a Unified Development Code or was that comprehensive?
It was a Unified Development Code.
So it was just the development portion that we've been talking about. So I think we could take it in phases and be more manageable that way.
And we may find out a review of the whole thing shows that it's 3 days' work to do the rest of it for $1, and we can knock it off and sit back happy. So we don't know, but I just don't want to lose I don't want to lose the trees for the forest.
I understand.
Yeah, I think Andy just pointed out a good point, which is when we get back to you in May, we're going to have vetted this through a consultant process. We'll have a better idea on budget and probably even a better insight into how we can break this down into manageable phases and pieces and more of an idea about how this can best be accomplished. So if we can move forward with it, then that will be the goal of coming back to you. It's not only have a consultant recommendation, but how we can manageably address the process with some insight into that.
Go ahead. I want to ask a question at the very end when everybody else has.
And I heard you say that at the very beginning, they would look over everything, look over our code and decide. Some of it may be really easy to just go ahead and update the code, and some of it's going to take a longer piece to develop.
Yes.
So
I was just going to say it's time to update the land use plan anyway. I think we're looking for a more user-friendly format, which is now an option for us. And this really is to address inconsistencies and to help us move forward. And if you think that, looking back like you did historically, if we still have ordinances that were written in 1964, we probably have some things that are outdated, which do cause inconsistencies and cause conflicts, for our community and for us. So I think this is a really positive, proactive step moving forward. And we'll learn more as we go. And staff can't do this all on their own. The time does not allow, and I do think there's benefit in having a third party look at it completely objectively. Perhaps people that haven't always been involved in every aspect of it, but somebody that looks at it objectively. As we have new people coming to our community all the time, we shouldn't have to explain all the complete history before they can understand an ordinance. So I think there's real benefit in that.
I think there is too. I think you're on track with what we need to do. I would kind of like for us to split that RFP down where we can take the review of the entire code as a separate item, and what you're talking about this morning as a separate item. And we need to make sure we can commit the budget funds that we have this year, commit those funds this year, and know how much more, if any, we need to budget for next year. So it's important that we go ahead and move forward and get those numbers. Commissioner Ratzenberger had one final question.
One question, and this, Andy, may be appropriate. Last year, we got something from KEMA that said, what do you think of the land use plan? What do you want to change? And I know we answered that, and we were supposed to get some kind of update this spring. Now, a month ago, we got some other email that said, here, what do you think? This is the 10-year review cycle. And they said, here's the KEMA land use plan reg. And we thought, or at least we talked about, maybe this was really the update they had done, but it's not. This is the old one, the thing we just got. It said update, and this is part of the review cycle. This is not the thing we responded to. Can we clarify where all of this is and what they're doing with our input? And maybe my buddy here probably knows the answer, but get ourselves on track, because that's important to this thing, at least, part-way.
Yeah, I think Commissioner Cahoon knows the most about this, but I did see something from the CAMA Division of Coastal Management staff that had proposed revised language, and then they addressed the comments from each community individually, one by one. And I don't know if you got that, but we'll get that to you. But I think they're now moving through a process where they've come up with the draft language based on everybody's comments, and then that's moving through your process.
That is moving through. That's an old document.
I know. I read it.
At the last meeting, actually, the CRC authorized staff to move forward with the new process for land use plans, which would prevent our debacle of the previous land use plan of taking 4 years, and with all the changes that we didn't want that were inserted. It will be a process by which the communities develop their land use plans. There will be no more grant funds. They're gone. So they've been taken away as part of the budgets.
That's okay.
But it will be our land use plan. It will no longer go to the CRC for approval. It will only go to the Director of Coastal Management. And it pretty much will be our document. To say that it takes 4 years and we want this language put in, that's not happening. I think you'll be much happier with the finished product as you were the 2000 land use plan.
I'll give up the grant money to be much happier.
That's right. Well, it's more a case of local government control.
Yes, Commissioner Ramirez.
Just one final comment, and as much for public consideration as for discussion amongst us, is a bit of a nuance about sea level rise, which was listed as one of the first bullet in one of the categories on one of your charts. I think that we've embarked on a path of looking at the potential of impacts of sea level rise on the town, just in case, but not assuming anything, because we, as a state, kind of backed off significantly on jumping to any scientific or non-scientific conclusions about sea level rise. So when it's listed on this chart, I don't want anyone to think that there's any automatic assumption of any sea level rise conclusions that's driving this. It's just a consideration and an awareness.
Commissioner Cahoon.
The legislature mandated a new sea level rise study be done. The chairman put forward of the Coastal Resource Commission put forward a process. The science panel has done its work. It was put out for peer review. The comments have come back. The science panel is responding back to the questions raised by the peer review, and it is due for a final report to the legislature later this year. So it is coming forward. We did have one hiccup last week that I'm sad to report. One of the scientists that was doing the part of the peer review died unexpectedly, which was horrible. But Dr. Houston still has Dr. Dean's questions, and so they will still be answered.
Do we have a motion for planning to proceed with the RFP, RFQ process on land use plan revision and code revision?
I make a motion that they proceed forward as presented.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Okay, any discussion?
And with that motion, it's in consideration of the comments particularly that you made about the division of the approach and et
Yeah,
cetera?
I think so.
Yes.
Any further discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, like sign, and it's so ordered. We have a 10 o'clock Pacific recommendation from the Downey Park Committee on the park design, but if the committee would bear with us a minute, I'd like to take a 10-minute break before we get started.
Thank you so much, Mayor.
Oh, that's interesting. Weird.
Mayor? We have a new remote, and if you're comfortable with it, you just press this or this to go forward and backward in a PowerPoint presentation.
Oh, that'd be fantastic.
If you're not comfortable, you can say revert on next slide, but this will be up here.
And then revert.
Hillary Clinton using your personal email.
Nags Head Board of Commissioners back in session.
Item I3.
Drop down to item I, number 3, recommendations from the Downey Park Committee on the park design. And we'll have the committee present that, make that presentation. Ben, how are you this morning?
Good morning. I'm great. Thank you for asking. And I'd like to thank you, Mayor, and the commissioners for this opportunity for us to, not just for us to make a presentation this morning. I'd like to thank you on behalf of the entire steering committee for the opportunity to be engaged in such an exciting project for our town. We really appreciate what the town has taken the steps to do there in acquiring the property and to open the process so that the public has the opportunity to be engaged there. And we're very excited about it. So you all know that I'm Ben Cahoon. I'm the kind of unofficial spokesperson for the steering committee this morning, the one who is willing to speak most of the words this morning, although I'm going to call on a couple of members of the steering committee as we go along. One of the things I want to go off course for just a second as I talk about this park and talk about living in Nags Head. This park is roughly halfway between my office and my home, and I've taken to calling that part of Nags Head across, I live in Nags Head Acres, I call this Uptown Nags Head because there's literally no other place on the Outer Banks, if you think about it, where you can live and you can walk to the beach, you can walk into a place like Nags Head Woods, you can walk to a grocery store, multiple coffee shops, a bank, a hardware store, a YMCA, my office, a park. All of those things are within easy walking distance for me, and you literally cannot do that anywhere else on the Outer Banks, including the town of Manio. And this park will be right in the heart of that, which is pretty awesome. That kind of public enthusiasm really came through in the pumpkin fair. You could feel it that day for those of us who were out there, that the community, the parents, the kids are all really excited about seeing something happen with that space. And we got a lot of survey responses, which I think is another indication of the kind of enthusiasm that the committee feels for this project and this process. And you could also get a sense of it if you were in our steering committee meetings, that we've all been on committees where we didn't feel as though the work was going anywhere and we weren't doing anything that had any lasting value. And I think everybody on this committee would say that part of the reason we've been so engaged is because we could really see this happen, and we really believed it was going to happen, and believed that the contributions of the community were going to be meaningful here. So that's all very exciting and has all come through in the process. Reason we're here today is to present the work that the steering committee and the community have done to you, primarily so that it can start to go into the capital improvement plan process, so that grants can be applied for and that construction can begin out there on site. So there was a survey about what kinds of amenities the community wanted to see out there, and you can see that the sort of traditional public park elements rose to the top: a picnic area and a shelter, a playground, walking paths, a performance venue of some kind. Those all got a lot of comment. What also got a lot of comment were spaces, amenities, and opportunities for health and wellness, green space, fitness trails, basketball and tennis. Those all got comments. This is a healthy community. I see a lot of folks out there walking. I see the mayor out walking. There are a lot of runners in the town of Nags Head, a lot of cyclists. It's a very active community. I know Carrie sees a lot of those folks. In fact, if I could, why don't you come up and talk about the community and kind of the health and wellness aspect.
Good morning. My name is Carrie, and as Ben said, I am probably what you call a fitness guru, but I've got other interests as well. But therefore, I'm out with a lot of these active people. I teach at the Y, and this park is huge for us because, well, fitness trails, possibilities to have what Duck has, an opportunity to offer free classes. I've got the opportunity to teach a few seasons up there, and it's amazing how many people show up. And it's not just tourists, although there are a lot of tourists, but there were a lot of townspeople there. So, you know, I felt pretty much like a rock star when I'm teaching over 100 people in the lawns at Duck. And but just the comments afterwards, how cool was that for that town to offer that in the summertime, and the space being on grass. And I don't know if you've ever tried to do yoga on the beach or Pilates on the beach, but it just doesn't quite work. I know it sounds romantic and everything, but to have this space at Dowdy Park is huge for our community. And like Ben said, it's in walkable distance. I mean, we've wanted to offer like full moon yoga classes, sunrise yoga, sunrise Pilates, and really just no space. We've met at Bonnet Street. We do meet. There's a huge group of us, and we bring our towels, and on the concrete we, you know, after we do our cycle and our run and our swim, we'll stretch out, you know, on the concrete. But so to have real green grass in walking distance, and the community to come is what I hear a lot. That's really asked for. So anyway.
Thank you very much. And while we're at this point, I've been remiss in not asking the committee to stand up and be recognized, and I need to do that at this point. So if I could, without necessarily coming to the podium, I'd like for all of the committee members to please stand up, if you would, be recognized. And that includes Dave, who's already standing in the back of the room, who I'm going to ask to speak in just a moment. And if you would just say your names.
Carrie Sanders.
Lisa Stryker. Teresa Gerber.
Okay. And David Elder. And while we're sort of at this point, I also want to ask David if he would to come up and offer some comments on what this opportunity means for the community.
Good morning. What a balmy morning to be discussing these opportunities. This proposal, this plan is kind of an offset of what we worked on a prior rec workshop group. And one of the things that came up in a lot of the interactions that we had there was this is a community that is, a lot of people have a lot of outdoor activities. There are a lot of young people. There are a lot of people who have outdoor activities who now have children, and you have these clustered communities. And one of the things that we struggled with again and again was connectivity between these clustered neighborhoods, these clustered activities. And we started looking at the possibility of having some unifying element, not a downtown, but someplace where the roads cross, where these trails could come together and have some sort of amenity, some sort of offering at that location. When the town this was originally proposed to buy this property, I spoke at that time, and one of the best points in my mind at that intersection was there was no real plan. And what that's done is that's kicked open doorways for interaction, for conversation, for people to contact all of us that have been involved in this, and I'm sure as you all as well as commissioners, because we're all stakeholders. But it's made it very clear to me that all of the residents, not only the residents of Nags Head, but also the residents of the Outer Banks and the visitors to the Outer Banks are stakeholders in this process. And you cannot look at any of the decisions that we made without including all of them in that process, because they're in this room, their words ring in our ears, and their needs and their questions and their queries and their concern and their happiness for this intended plan are here in the document. And I feel like a little bit of an instrument to them. My job is working in the community. I work on the beaches. I spend a lot of time around visitors. I'm very exposed to this stuff, and people do not hesitate to tell you what they think as soon as they know you're involved. And this level of involvement has been, for me, really heartening, because it starts to define what is a community on the Outer Banks, what is Nags Head, what are the opportunities that we can offer as a town for our residents and our visitors. And I've been very happy to take part in this and look forward to seeing this plan move steps further forward towards its natural maturation. Thank you.
Thank you, David. David said with a lot of feeling and a lot of passion on behalf of the community some things that I'm going to plow through a little more dryly here. But we all, I want to make the point, we all feel that sense of community and passion and desire for this thing. So to continue with this, the presentation, the activities paralleled, the desire for activities paralleled the responses that we got about the kind of amenities that should be in the park. If you look at things like farmers market, concerts, social gatherings, theater and movies, that's really a call for us to gather as a community on an appropriate scale. I really sense that you know, that's not just a rote response of generic parkness. I really have a sense that this is what people would like for us to be able to gather in this kind of way in this park. And again, the sporting events, the fitness classes, the gardening, the lectures, a place of green relief for the community, and closely mirrored within the town and responses from outside the town. The public input, the comments also echoed the responses that we got on the surveys, the active and passive recreation, the social and cultural events, the performance areas, the art theme, which I'll talk about a little bit more as we go through the presentation. And one of the things I'll highlight is the desire for unprogrammed open space, unprogrammed green space. As a community and at the county and the town level, we've done a really good job of providing programmed green space like ball fields, soccer fields, and baseball fields and that sort of thing. What we don't have a lot of, what we actually have very little of, is unprogrammed green space, and there's a strong desire to see that here in the park. And there are some other aspects that can be incorporated on the site. One of the things that we heard very clearly is this needs to support our entire community, all ages, all activity levels. There needs to be a playground, and there need to be bocce courts and other kinds of activity areas within the park. There are some desires in the community that don't fit in this space just because of size and because of expense. I mean, the committee was sensitive to the concerns that this is a space that has to be maintained going forward. And so there are some things like a pool that would be duplicative of other amenities that already exist in the town and would be expensive to build and maintain. So you're familiar with the site and the existing conditions there. So how did we start here? We had a few meetings. We talked about our ideas and what our opportunities were. We all took a homework assignment, all of the members of the committee. What were the components of a great park or a public space? And we gathered some images. We tried to make it visual rather than just words. And art emerged as a strong theme. We have a strong arts community. The Nags Head Arts District is just immediately north of this site. The town has committed to art by hanging a lot of art on the walls of Town Hall. And so incorporating art in the park is a strong theme. Informal play, not just another jungle gym, not just another swing set, but play that's innovative and really attractive to young children, and innovative. As Carrie said, space for the fitness and group activities that groups in the community are desperate to have the kind of space for. The unprogrammed green space, just a place to go sit on the lawn and eat lunch, hang out with your children. But it's also a space that's very active, not just that's a sort of beautiful and attractive, but vacant, but that supports activity and that is filled with people. The last thing any of us want to do is to build something that doesn't get used. So whether it's art market, farmer's market, music, other kinds of activities, and that there be opportunities to get your hands dirty, to engage with the ground, and to enjoy beautiful landscaping. A garden space was very important. The opportunity to play, that it would be consistent thoroughly with the standards that Nags Head has established. Any architectural components that would be in the appropriate style. We'd be sensitive to the night sky. We'd be sensitive to water use, all of the kind of standards that Nags Head has, sustainability. So what can go here on the site? What makes sense? What got the most support? And you see those listed, the multi-purpose field, the kind of unprogrammed green space, space for performance, space for activities like markets that needs to be hardscaped or a hard surface, a court on which to hit a tennis ball or shoot baskets, garden area, a trail system with fitness stations, the children's play area, landscaping and art, places to just sit and enjoy the park, shade structures for those hot summer days, visual elements like the wetland garden, pedestrian connections at the corners to tie it to the intersection at the Y and to the Y, to tie it to the Barn Street access, to tie it to the school, and the sort of conventional facilities of restrooms and parking. So diagrammatically, this is how those were first envisioned as fitting together, just what are the spaces and sort of how might they begin to be arranged on the site. And so our consultants prepared for us 3 concepts that we were able to then present to the public and get their feedback. And you have seen these. They all have their advantages and disadvantages. The one that emerged as the candidate that seemed to fulfill most of the needs with some modification was concept 3. I think the primary reason for that was that it had separated green space so that you had the unprogrammed playing field so that you could have a group over there doing one activity while there could be a musician or an outdoor classroom or some other kind of activity going on in another green space. And then the other elements like the garden and the sport court and the hardscape all got plugged in around that. So that was fundamentally the concept that seemed to come the closest to meeting all of the needs. So after going through that process, the committee, and one of the things I want to hit on again is the depth with which the committee sort of stuck with this and remained engaged and went to, initial meetings a year ago when we had nothing but a blank slate in front of us, through all kinds of brainstorming sessions, to meetings with consultants, to public comment opportunities. It's just been a tremendously engaged group, which I'm very gratified to be connected with. So we got a presentation from the consultants, saw what they had done, talked it through, made some recommendations for modifications, and those were actually relatively minor in some way. They were shifting the elements around, and we ended up at this plan, essentially. And so I'll talk a little bit about this, and I'll use the laser pointer to point out some of the things that we ended up with here. So you have the multi-use playing field here, a multi-use turf area fronted by the pavilion. The pavilion is situated such that it sort of turns its back to the northeast wind, turns its open side to the southwest, which seemed to make sense on that site. The restrooms that would be positioned near the parking lot and sort of central to these activities and sort of at the back of whatever kind of event might be going on here, so that sort of makes sense in that placement. The playground elements clustered here, not sort of rigidly boxed in, but in a nice cluster here. A nice landscape wetland kind of entry feature here on this key entry corner here. Another entry which for me, I kept pointing out this, I bike to work as much as I can when the weather permits, and this is kind of a key intersection here. I come down Wrightsville from the north and turn at this, and so this is for those vacationers and residents who are north of the site, and for those who might come over from the beach access. This becomes an entry point here, and that's there's the garden space ended up there to create a nice entry to the park. There is a garden plot and the bocce area here just behind the pavilion, and then the multi-use court, which is closest to the entry that comes in from the school. So it's a really kind of a nice logical arrangement. There's a logic to it, and then you see a really nice flow to it, and it's very kind of organic in the way that our consultant put this together. These flowing walkways, and these areas are envisioned as small dunes that would be landscaped here, which also help to visually separate this field from this one. It's just I think conceptually it's a nice plan that we can do a lot with. And I'm going to go through this. Really is a element by element. What I just described to you is the pieces that we moved and where they ended up being located. And late in the process, there were some shade structures added to the garden area, which is a really nice addition. And I believe, yes. So that's the plan. That's the plan that the committee recommends to you, that we bring to you after all of this process and input and work by the consultants. Again, the purpose for doing this today is so that it can enter your budget process here this spring, and there are grants available for certain components of this. And at this point, I would ask any members, of the committee who were here, and the consultants. John is here somewhere. John. Anything that I missed, that I understated, didn't cover, if you want to jump in at this point, Carrie or David?
I do.
Okay, sure.
One thing that we had talked about too was that, when we got some of the response from the community, they were like, "Oh, we want a skate park, we want, a lot of things." But we have the Settlefield Park, which is, they wanted soccer fields. We've got that. We've got our playground, specific Barn Street. And I think what we wanted here was just nice space, a nice looking space, and thus the art came in, and which I think would just really add to the town of Nags Head. So, and then hopefully linking all those with paths and signage. Like Ben was saying, we have the woods and then the beach, and so just making a nice community area, but this park being something a little bit more special than just your typical everyday park. So anyway, thank you.
Carrie makes a good point, and it was something that we talked about. This is one component of a larger discussion that we weren't all engaged in about parks and recreation in the town, and it is one piece. It's an important piece. It has the opportunity to be a link between the beach, and the Y in Nags Head Woods. It's sort of a nice connector there, is another role that this plays. Yes, some sort of connected system so that our residents and visitors can get by foot and by bike safely from point to point is also something that needs to be considered. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben, very much. That's
yes, sir.
Quite a report, and want to thank the committee for all the great work that's been done. I don't think there's been any more public input on anything the town's done than this park, and there's been a lot of interest. A lot of people wanting to know when are you going to get started, when's something going to happen. But we've always said we've got to get this master plan before we touch anything there, and I think this committee's just done a fantastic job of that.
Thank you. And one of the things I've also been remiss so far in not doing is thanking staff. The planning staff here has been tremendous as part of this process and incredibly supportive and resourceful, and look forward to their role in carrying this through too. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Walters, do you have some comments you'd like to make?
I do. I've had the privilege of working with this group of citizens and staff. I've been your liaison on this committee, and a tremendous amount of work has gone into this throughout the year. The committee was a little larger than this, and some people, for various reasons, ended up with other family commitments and things and couldn't participate all the way till the end. But everyone has truly been dedicated to the process and provided tremendous input, We've worked through a whole lot of issues. I think everybody has really been engaged in the community. The community has really been engaged in this process. And this concept, and at this point it is a concept, really provides a much-needed amenity and connectivity in our community. I think it's just a tremendous opportunity for us that really shows a community vision. And I'm hopeful that we can carry this out. I know it's not going to happen overnight, but if we can approve a concept, it will give us many opportunities moving forward for grants, and we'll have an idea of what we can put in our CIP each year to carry this forward. So I'd like to really thank the entire community, all the Nags Head Elementary School students that did artwork, Marcia Klein and Carrie, who painted the side of the current Dowdy building, which provided great community input and interest for us, particularly with parents and grandparents in the community. So it's been a really great process and very rewarding, and everybody, staff and everyone worked really, really hard. So thank you.
Thank you very much for all the work that you've led there and coordinated. We certainly appreciate your efforts. Any questions?
Just a comment, if I may. Again, I'd like to thank Mayor Pro Tem Walters for a significant role in this and leading the efforts of the committee. Thank the committee and the staff for everything that they've done. I think it's a phenomenal product that we have in front of us, and recognizing it's just a concept right now, but it looks so good. And my view of what the objective was here was, again, a place for recreation and relaxation for all ages. And I think you've done that very well. I like Carrie's comments about this should be an enjoyable, relaxing location. And that's what I see here. But I'd like to just leave one thought with the committee, because I know there's a lot of work still to be done and refining the design and that type of thing. I was very encouraged by a phrase that was in the February 10th minutes meeting, February 10th meeting minutes about basketball, mentioned discussion of the half-court basketball. And I see that in the chart, it shows full-court basketball, and understanding this is just still a concept and can be revised. To me, that's the only element here that could more or less get in the way of the relaxing enjoyable area for people of all ages, because I kind of see this happen on the beach a lot, particularly during the vacation season. Young families come down, a lot of young men just out of high school or out of college, or very young families, get out on the beach with a football or a hard baseball, and they can easily take over a whole area, and everybody else has to shy away or go to another spot. And that can easily happen with full court basketball. No disrespect to them, they want to get out and exercise hard and play hard, etc. But if they do that full court, that prevents anyone else from using part of that area and kind of pushes them to other locations, and it can be rather imposing. My thought would be, in your considerations in the future design, try to keep that to half-court marking for basketball, keep the rest of the hard court and for other options and things, and hopefully that's what you're already thinking of, but I just wanted to lend my comment to that.
Thank you, and that is what we were thinking of. The space is full court. The conversation among the committee and the consultants was not to put up more than one goal, so that it would only function as a half court, so that you didn't get the kind of activity that you're describing, and also then have at one end a wall where you could hit a tennis ball up against or something like that, or just throw a ball up against.
Right.
Yep.
And I would just say, I'm glad you're thinking of that. And if you would change your chart to not show the full basketball court markings, people wouldn't be thinking, oh, we're going to be getting full basketball court here.
Just a couple comments. One is I'd like to thank the committee for all their work, but I'm even more impressed by the thought process that went into developing this plan, the community involvement that you listened to and welcomed. I was out there at the Pumpkin Fair Day and saw lots of families, lots of people filling out comment cards, and I appreciate the fact that the commissioners were invited to see the conceptual designs and have conversations with staff and Commissioner Walters. But this, to me, has been one of the most open community processes I've seen in Nags Head. And I just want to commend the committee, mainly for their dedication and sticking through the process. That's really important as well. But you've presented us with something that's very intriguing and exciting.
Commissioner Ratzenberger?
I too want to thank the committee, Mayor Pro Tem Walters, and staff for the work here. And again, this is one of these let's not lose it things, because this committee has been fully, the deliberations and everything have been fully documented on the website, fully transparent, fully clear to everybody. And that's another one of these, we don't want to lose it when this is over things, because they've done a super job, and this needs to be the standard for any moving forward. And thank you and congratulations for that. This is fine for a general concept. We'll get into the details. I do want to bring up, or at least piggyback on our code revisions and other things. This event space that's up here, we need to look at our own code. We have, previous boards have made farmers markets, and they have made carts and other things in an effort to protect brick and mortar and commercial. And now, as we, as the owners of the park who would be scheduling into it, have technically placed ourselves in conflict with that philosophy. And we at some point need to take a look at and that may be changes to the outdoor food carts, farmers market, other stuff that have been done before, but we need to take a look at that, because we are now potentially managers of a commercial operation, a potential commercial operation that could be in conflict with that. And that's all I'm going to say. There's nothing to stop and get away from it. We're just going to have to grow up and look at what we're doing. So.
Thank you, sir. I think the committee has just done a fantastic job. We gave you one directive when you started this, and this was we wanted a park that was was dedicated to all demographics in the town, and you have certainly achieved that objective. And we want to thank Mayor Pro Tem Walters and the entire committee for all the work that was done in the openness. And I would like to entertain a motion now that we accept this plan that we have this morning as the master plan for Dowdy Park. I want to do that because we've already have, and Andy has some information on that, we already have an application in for a fund grant to get this work started. And Andy, that has not been decided on yet, has it? It comes up later this spring?
Right. So the earliest we would know about the largest grant we applied for would be May. And then there potentially could be a second award in July. And then we are going to put together a CIP item for this whole project for the next fiscal year, which would be a phase 1 component of this park. And depending on whether we get that first grant, will dictate what we do from there. But then there's other grant opportunities later in the year, so we could adjust as we find out what's going to happen.
And what a caution the public, this is a major investment, and it won't be built in 1 year. But we will be aggressively going after grant funds and getting all the help that we can to get at least a phase 1 done.
Mayor, can we authorize staff to look at other grant sources such as the Reynolds Foundation, the Community Foundation, and so forth, and, you know, bring us back possibly those opportunities?
Maybe some art grants, maybe.
That we not limit ourselves to Pardiff, but look outside at other organizations that, I know, is it Murdoch, that has developed a whole former mill village into a healthy living and healthy scientific research that we might could get some grant money from as well. But
well, one of the things that the board's going to see probably next month is the final report that Albemarle and VHB are putting together for us. And that's going to include all the documentation of the activities that you've seen presented today, but also cost estimates for this, potential phasing. And then they're going to list potential grant opportunities. So maybe we can get with them, discuss some of these ideas, and incorporate those potential grant sources into the report. And then, once you see the report and approve that, then that would give us the ability to go and pursue any of those grant opportunities in the report.
Did you say there would be potential phasing in that? I mean, just at the goose egg level, do this and this kind of thing?
Yeah, I think there will be. I'd have to talk to the consultant about that, about how it's going to be presented in there. The consultant is certainly aware about this phase 1 and what we've done so far, and
right,
how we've broken that out. But from there, we're not quite sure, and that could depend on how the costs work out. And we'll be talking about that over the next month. So
I'm certainly not an artist or a designer, but it seems to me that if we had an idea of, after the basics, let's focus on it would be more cohesive in whatever you want to call it. If we did this goose egg for next and that one next, that kind of thing to build it. And that was the one thing I was kind of wondering if we would get, but that's fine.
There'll be more input from the board on that too, once we get an idea of the costs and how we think it could all work out. And then, I'll just say one thing. This will be such an iterative process that this is just a concept, but from there, we'll be working on site plans for different phases, and then we'll break that down into even more refined parts of that, like landscaping. I mean, I could envision, the committee and the board looking at a separate landscape plan as an individual component, and I think that if the design and the construction of this can evolve over time in that way, we'll have a better end product.
Okay, so all we need this morning is to accept the committee's report and accept this as the master plan as we go forward. Do we have a motion for that?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Not all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, like sign. There being none. Thank you so much for your efforts. We really appreciate it.
May I have one comment?
Yes.
I failed to acknowledge the work of John DeLucia and Albemarle Engineering, and also Chris DeWitt and his team with VHB. They've been really invaluable to the process and really truly listened to what we were saying with revision and revision. So thank you all very much for your hard work.
Thank you very much. Go back to item H, it's old business items. Town Manager Ogburn, you're up.
Yes, sir. Thank you. We had at your January board retreat, we brought some policies before you for discussion that we were wanting to make a few modifications to, and the four being the flag policy, the fund balance policy, rules of procedure, and the board committee policy. I've got some suggestions on what we might be able to do to clarify some of the comments that Mr. Cornwell made on the board committee policy. The others are, including that one, are the same pretty much as they were when you saw them at your retreat, with the exception of the flag policy. Staff discussed this item some more, and while we hope we never have to do this, we felt it was important to include in that flag policy that we lower the flag in the event of a line of duty death, and we, of course, have a definition in the event of a line of duty death, the U.S. flag will be flown at half-staff from time of notification until sunset the day of funeral or interment. A line of duty death is defined as any death that occurs to a Nags Head fire, police, or ocean rescue department member while on duty. The rest of this would be by order of the president, and that is the recommendation for the flag policy. I can go through these. I don't know if you want to take action on all or one at a time.
Let's take them one at a time in case there are any comments. Any comments on the flag policy?
I do.
Yes.
So Public Works has a water main break. They're out there up to their belt buckles in water repairing a pipe, and the trench collapses. That's not line of duty?
Well, yes, and this recommendation is certainly not meant to devalue any staff member over another. The line of duty death is, it's referenced in some manuals, and that's where we took this from. We certainly can do the same for any staff member, but I think this is common practice.
I have an issue that we don't have the flag at half-staff almost daily for all the soldiers that have died overseas.
Right. We can include
on this stuff.
We can include all staff members, any town
or not
employee.
I would agree with that. I would agree with that.
Include any town employee.
Everybody's equally valuable.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other comments?
Just to understand, under the community grief, is this a town manager decision, or, you know, who makes that decision and for how long?
The idea was, I'm glad you mentioned that. The community grief was a suggestion that came out of the board retreat that we purchase a flag that says we mourn our loss for occasions where a former commissioner or a volunteer has passed away. I would think the policy should read that the town manager make that recommendation, or any board member can make that recommendation. I don't think it needs to have official approval from the board, but I think you need to be aware before, and we can go back to the original policy that included, that defined, we were lowering the flag according to a policy for those deaths as well, and include any former commissioner or volunteer to that policy.
I agree with everything you're saying, and I think we could just incorporate a little bit of wording in there to make that clear. I'm certainly comfortable with the town manager.
And I'll notify.
And notifying the board and go for it.
Good.
That would be my opinion.
Okay, do we have a motion?
Motion to accept the flag policy modified to include any town employee and to think you were asking for some specificity on the grief flag.
I'll second that motion.
Comfortable with the revision.
It is as determined by the town manager.
As determined by the town manager.
Okay, we got the motion and second. Any discussion? Not all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, like sign. There being none, so ordered.
The next one is the fund balance policy. We included some language here to, I think it more represents the intent of the board when this policy was first adopted, and I'll read what's been included. It's the town of Nags Head's management will strive to maintain an unassigned general fund balance available for appropriation according to North Carolina General Statute 159-8. It'll be 50% of expenditures less bond debt, but not less than $5 million as per audited financial statements at the end of the fiscal year. I think this just clarifies that it's 50% of expenditures and but not less than $5 million.
Okay, any questions? Any discussion?
I think this is a good clarification.
Do we have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion moved, made and seconded. Any discussion? Not all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, like sign. There being none. So ordered.
The rules of procedure, this is primarily for updates from, let's see, there was, we've taken this from suggested rules of procedures. We've adapted it. This was originally written by Fleming Bell with the School of Government. This addresses rules of procedure for not only the Board of Commissioners, but also the town boards and committees. You'll see the last update was in, well, it was originally May of '97, so there's been some changes.
Carol's work.
And while we were taking a look, we felt like we needed to include this. One of a lot of it is just making housekeeping changes. There were some new laws that were included that allowed us to publish the town's agenda on the website. It also email links to the town website. It talks about that we will hand deliver site plans, but the rest of it is paperless agendas. We've made some changes to the order of business under Rule 6, a little bit of change in the adoption of how your agenda will be set up for your board meetings. But again, it's primarily just simple housekeeping.
Any questions?
I had one.
Yes.
And this is probably my fault because I was the one saying get rid of all the notes that are in there from whatever. But Rule 3, I think we threw out the baby with the bathwater. Rule 3, the note there, what used to be that they had the old board take ceremonial actions. I'm going to suggest that we add a sentence to that Rule 3 that says, ready?
Uh-huh.
Incoming and outgoing mayors may agree to take ceremonial actions prior to the swearing in. Just to allow that as an option, because right now it doesn't. It really doesn't matter if it's not mayors changing, because the mayor's in there, it doesn't matter. You can do whatever you want to do on the agenda. But we ought to allow some latitude in there to allow an old board to do the ceremonial actions before the new board takes over. And I just wanted to make sure that option stayed available.
Okay. Any other discussion? We have a motion.
I'll make the motion to accept it with the amendment that I offered.
Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. Any discussion? Not all those in favor of accepting the rules of procedure as amended, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, like sign, there being none, it's so ordered.
Thank you. And then last, board and committee policy. Again, some updates here. I think we could add a clarification. Under number 2, it defines the duties. The following town boards, committees advise the governing board as follows, and then it lists those. But as Mr. Cornwell mentioned, under number 3, it only under membership, it only describes committee members. So I think we just need to add some inclusive language that all, the title town boards and committees. I don't know if just adding boards/committees is enough.
Board/committees is what you've got in the first paragraph under membership there.
I think that'd be consistent throughout. And then, of course, the question as to whether or not 3 consecutive meetings is too many would be a decision for the board.
Any discussion?
I'd like to start again. Thank you, Mr. Cornwall, for bringing that up, because that was number 1 on my list. Consecutive, 3 consecutive is entirely too many. It's entirely too loose a standard. Conceptually, you can miss 8 meetings a year. Miss 2, show for 1, miss 2, show for 1. And I think we need to either drop consecutive or reduce the numbers to allow us to, so we're not stuck with something we can't allow.
Just a point of
Commissioner
clarification, by executive order, the governor has mandated that CRC members, if you miss 2 meetings per year, you're done. And we only meet 6 times a year. So just to give you an example that there are standards out there.
Other discussion? Yes.
Well, I have a question. It says the town governing board may remove any member of any town established committee if absent 3 consecutive meetings without just excuse. Just excuse, that's a really
What's the
pretty
definition?
vague. What's the definition?
Gotta have a definition.
I mean, that's really subjective, in my opinion.
What's without just excuse, you mean?
Well,
What's the definition?
who determines what is a just excuse? I'm just saying.
We can't make a laundry list of them, you know?
Well,
I think-
How far down to the family tree can you have a desk to go chase? I mean, you know,
I think it would be, I think we could get by that by making it at the discretion of the committee chairman.
Does the attorney have any?
Or, what I was going to say, without just excuse as determined by the board or committee. Let them vote on it. But that way, it's within the discretion of that body, whether something is a just excuse or not. And on Commissioner Ratzenberger's point, one alternative would be to have the 3 consecutive meetings or X number of meetings per year. So you have both, you have a dual standard.
I'd be more inclined to say 2 consecutive or 3 in a year. I mean, there's a cumulative, consecutive and a cumulative, because like I said, right now with this thing, you can miss 2 and show up for 1 and only be there 4 times a year, and technically we can't touch them.
Okay. Commissioner Demers, what are your ideas?
I agree with the changes on the number of meetings missed. I like the 2 consecutive, 3 in a year. I also have a comment, though, also on the boards, committees, and subcommittees. I find it confusing the way we have the wording currently, and I would hate to have to start over on this, but the planning board is kind of treated as a committee. Then you have subcommittees. They're sometimes addressed, not addressed. It's a little confusing in the wording that we currently have as to what rules apply to what, but I don't know what to do about it. I don't have a proposed solution to that, other than if everybody else felt the same way, maybe we could take another look at this with that specifically in mind. We talk about appointing people to committees or subcommittees, and when does the Board of Commissioners have to do that or not do that, and et cetera. If everybody else is happy with it, I'm okay with it. If others would like to take a look at that specific aspect, then I would go along with that.
Mayor Pro Tem Walters.
I mean, I think we listed the boards and committees above, or panels. We had this discussion, or my memory says we had this discussion at our board retreat, and sometimes there are ad hoc committees, such as Dowdy Park Committee was an ad hoc committee. The Business Committee is an ad hoc committee, so those are not addressed in here. It's only when the board establishes a standing committee, such as dangerous animal appeal or those kind of things. That's my understanding. Does that not?
And I recall that, but as I read it, it doesn't jump out at me that it's covered that way and is clear. I go back and read about ad hocs, and I have to question of the different committees I've been on in the past, were they ad hoc or were they board designated committees, temporary committees? I think that the breakout that you reference is good, but I don't think it's clearly enough addressed in here. But again, I'm flexible on it.
Well, ad hoc committees are addressed in that they can be appointed by the committee chair, and it further addressed that they should, when ad hoc committee is appointed, they should be appointed for a specific reason. And when that reason is completed, it's something that we have not been doing and we need to do, that committee is dismissed by a formal letter thanking them for their participation and informing them that the ad hoc committee has been resolved. So those things on ad hoc committees are addressed in this procedure.
I understand what you're saying. I still find it difficult to follow.
Mayor?
Yes.
Well, let me, just for example then, Dowdy Park Committee. Now, they've turned in their report, we've blessed it, and in a few months we'll get a consultant report and it's in our hands. So do they now fold? Some of the discussion I heard was that they would have input for each phase. So that Dowdy Park Committee could be going on 5-6 years. I mean, I don't think I'm not trying to take action today, but there is some confusion, as Commissioner Demers has, as to what's an ad hoc committee versus a real committee, and et cetera, et cetera. And I only use that as an example.
I think it goes on until they're formally dismissed, and that's one thing that we've not been doing in the past, and that we have run into some problems on. Some certain committee members thought
so we just need to be more.
They were still in progress and they weren't. So I think the language in here of formal conclusion of those committees is the most important part as far as ad hoc committees are concerned.
Mayor,
Yes, Commissioner Khan.
as it relates to attendance, I'd like to see, let me go back, I'm trying to find it.
I lost you too. Find it, let me know.
3 consecutive or 2 consecutive, whatever we do, regularly scheduled meetings, because if the meeting is moved and you don't know until the last minute that it's moved, there may be conflicts. I'd like to have somewhere that wording that says regularly scheduled, because if, I know, like, say in December, the planning board meeting was moved from one week to another. That can create conflict in and of itself because you don't know until the last minute that it's moved.
Right.
That's the only thing I'm.
Well, that falls under just excuse, to me.
That's fine, but we need to have it out there on the table.
Well, that's fine. I'm not. I fully support regularly scheduled.
Any other discussion?
One other, and I don't think this changed anything, but the minutes from our board retreat, we had a rather hefty discussion on resident versus non-resident members. And if you go back to paragraph 3C of this, it's on page 2, it says, and this is untouched, so we didn't even know what we were talking about, that all committee members shall be permanent residents of the town or own real property. So that does in fact allow non-residents to be members of committees, unless somebody wants to try and change that. I don't, I'm just highlighting the discussion we had versus the reality of what our policy was.
That says committees, not committees and boards.
Well, that's, now you're back to the change, the corrective change.
That goes back to Citizens Advisory, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that's where it went back to, and I think that was probably and we did have a non-resident member on the recycling committee, but wasn't a property owner.
Board, committee.
I think there's a difference. A board is appointed.
Right.
And a committee may not always be appointed.
We've got specific language pertaining to boards and which boards are appointed by the governing board. And then I don't have any problems with committee members being non-residents as long as they're property owners.
Well, is a personnel grievance panel, a board, or a committee then? I mean, every time I turn around, somebody, and I'm with Commissioner Demers on this, every time we turn around, somebody's got an exception to what it is we're trying to do.
You know, the town, under composition, the town governing board shall appoint all voting members to the board's committees, and then it lists the boards and committees that we appoint members to.
Right. Okay. Boards and committees.
Right.
The ad panel.
No, but down here, membership, all appointments to town boards and committees are made by the board. And then we get into does committee mean board or committee mean committee or committee board, simply because it's a matter of typing, what we typed. One global change can fix all of this. And then we're back to again, 3C.
All right, how do you want to fix it?
As far as I'm concerned, board/committee. Now we're haggling over the names of things. Board/committee/panel, just to get the.
My recollection was you wanted to ensure that the planning board and the board of adjustments were town residents, and maybe
right.
the language just needs to be
spelled
out that those two boards will be made up of town residents. The rest, as you said, you may have committee members that could add validity to the committee and the point and the purpose without being a resident.
I have a question on that one then. Does that also apply to dangerous animals, personnel grievance? Do we not include, those are all standing?
My opinion and recommendation that anybody that's making decisions that affect the town of Nags Head should be residents of the town of Nags Head. And those would be the ones that would have policy and longstanding determinations to make.
So I live right across the line in KDH, but I own stores and stuff down here, and I'm impacted by all those decisions, and my voice doesn't count.
It counts, but not on those four.
Not on those four.
Because you pointed out, there's also on the business committee, a business owner in Nags Head that lives in another community, but they were present at the forum. They were very active, and
I think we can have input from.
I just think the ones that are appointed
needed.
here they're pretty spelled out.
Right.
We don't talk about the subcommittees per se.
And that's not a board-appointed committee.
No, it's not.
Established but not appointed.
Right. The board establishes a committee, but they don't appoint them, so.
Okay, what's your pleasure? Do we have a motion to what we're talking about, or we have a motion to send this back to staff and reflect these comments and bring it back at a future date?
Mayor, I'd like to go out on a limb and make a motion that we not approve this at this time, that we go back to staff with the express direction to look at consistency of the terminology and recommendations on any revisions to the terminology that would clarify what I think some here on this board are very clear on what it means. If we could clarify the wording to reflect that, then we'd all be more comfortable with it. And that would be my motion.
Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Motion's made and second. Discussion.
Do we need to provide some direction with the consecutive meeting issue? If you miss, I know we're sending it back to staff, but we really haven't given any direction on that. We're talking about cleaning up wording, but that's a specific item.
Can we amend the motion on that specific item to amend the motion to direct staff on the rewrite, to limit that to two consecutive meetings?
Two consecutive scheduled meetings.
Yeah, 2 consecutive regularly scheduled meetings.
Without just excuse as determined by the chair?
Chair of the board.
I'd like 2 consecutive or 3 or 4 total during that same year.
No. Well, the amendment on the floor is for 2 consecutive meetings as regularly scheduled meetings unless excused by the committee chair. Is there a second to that amendment?
I'll second that amendment, and then I'd like to make an amendment to that to add 3 total.
Is there a second to that amendment?
Second that amendment.
Amendment's made and seconded to make that a miss of 3 total meetings per year, unexcused meetings per year. Any discussion on that amendment? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. And so ordered. On the amendment for 2 unexcused absences per year unless 2 absences per year unless excused by the committee chair, 2 continuous absences, consecutive absences per year unless approved by the excused by the committee chair, or as it is amended now, or 3 per year. Any discussion on that motion? On that amendment, excuse me. If not all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Then we come down to the motion as amended. Any discussion on the motion as amended?
Carolyn, have you got this all straight?
I was going to say, I'm confused at this point.
We got it. Carolyn has it.
Okay,
That's no problem.
all right.
On the motion as amended, any discussion? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. There being none.
We're done.
We're done.
But
We couldn't have any more amendments according to our policy.
Right.
And the question of compensation should be held during the budget process.
I have one other issue on this whole thing. Have we got the deck clear so far? I had one other question on this whole thing we never got to. Is that it, Matt?
Yeah.
Page 3, halfway down, appointment, bullet or paragraph D. There's no person shall serve on 2 more on. Okay, never mind. I misread that. Delete that whole thing.
Thank you.
I got it.
Let's handle that with another motion anyway.
No, I wasn't, I misread the whole thing. I read it 4 times.
Excuse me. All right, down to, let's take care of all of our committee, all of our policies. Committee reports. you have any committee reports today? Committee, Mayor Pro Tem, I think you have a
Marvin,
committee
do you have
report.
one?
I have no reports.
Okay, I have one on the tourism board meeting. We have changed our meetings to the last Thursday of the month to accommodate the schedules of some new board members. And it will be nearly impossible for me to get information to you in time for a board packet. So just bear with me a minute. Just have a couple of items to make you aware of. We approved a couple of grants, $30,000 to Outer Banks Conservationist for repair and restoration of the windmill in Manio. And we also approved a $57,000 grant to the Roanoke Island Historical Association to renovate their soundstage theater. And for occupancy for the calendar year, January through December of 2014 was up 4.41%, and meals for the same period were up 5.21%. So that's really great. And then when you break that down, so many pages here, by district, Nags said for that same calendar year, occupancy was up 5.04%, and meals were up 10.96%. So that means our local businesses are doing well, hopefully.
Or the prices are going up.
Or the prices are going up, one or the other. Let's hope it's a combination in there somewhere. I just wanted to make you all aware of a future date, which is May 7th. That's going to be the Outer Banks Tourism Summit, which will be held at Pamlico Jack's, beginning at 8:45 in the morning. And that will conclude on the event site for a kickoff celebration there and a live concert with a bluegrass festival called Green Sky Bluegrass. So hopefully everybody will, if you can't attend the summit, maybe at least be able to attend the kickoff event. Some events coming up in the near future. March 14th is the Kelly's Running of the Leprechauns, 10K. Daffodilly Fest begins at the park in Manio. What is Elizabeth Gardens, thank you. And then Kelly St. Patrick's Day Parade is on the 15th. Taste of the Beach begins on March 19th through the 22nd. And the Lost Colonies Haunted History is on March 22nd and runs through April 30th. And again, I told you about the Tourism Summit. And some upcoming events for the Outer Banks event site are going to be OBX Brewfest will be on Sunday, May 31st. The Children at Play Windmill Point Art Fair will be on Thursday, June 4th. They'll have another one on Thursday, July 2nd, and also Thursday, August 6th, and Saturday, October 17th is the Outer Banks Seafood Festival. And a couple of items of note on TripAdvisor. The Outer Banks was recognized as a top destination for vacation rental homes. And on the Travel Channel, Cape Hatteras is number 5 out of 101 best surf and sand hotspots. So
Great.
Those are some great designations. Also, at our meeting, we discussed the oil and gas drilling, and if you are not aware, there is a meeting, a BOEM meeting that is going to be held on the Outer Banks that was requested by many legislators throughout our state and federal government. Well, our representative, Walter Jones. And that's going to be March 16th at the Ramada Plaza. You can go anytime from 3 to 6 to provide comments to them on oil and gas drilling. And also the Dare County Tourism Board is sending a letter to BOEM and some of our elected leaders regarding offshore oil and natural gas drilling. The Dare County Tourism Board has a long history as you know, of being opposed to oil and gas drilling and have passed resolutions in 2005, 2009, 2014, and the board instructed the chairman, Tim Cafferty, to send a letter to that effect. I've given each of you a copy of that, as we realize that tourism really is our lifeblood, and one accident could jeopardize our entire livelihood on the Outer Banks. So I've provided a copy of that letter for you. Again, I'm sorry it's so late. I just received it. In case we would like to discuss this and perhaps do the same, I believe the deadline for comments to BOEM is March 31st. I can't swear to that date, but I believe that's the date. Is that something we might consider?
Thank you very much. It's one item to consider that would this board like for a letter similar to the letter that the tourism board has written to BOEM for this board to send a similar letter. We have certainly in the past passed resolutions
Many times.
that we could refer back to. It's consensus of the board that we should do the same thing. Send a similar letter.
I would agree.
Get a letter prepared and get it circulated so you can take a look at it.
Ask the manager to draft a letter on, or you?
Manager, draft a letter over my signature, if you would, please.
My preference is that we minimize the disaster aspects, and that we maximize. I thought the Tourism Bureau's analysis of, since everybody screams economics and jobs and the rest of it, the Tourism Bureau's analysis of employment and money and stuff on their county compared to any possible best case scenario, even for a successful oil and gas thing, is eye-opening to anybody. And it would be my preference that we emphasize that and not get into the, oh, what if they have an oil spill thing.
We can try to
on
all
that, I
that
mean,
into the letter. I know
And those
town manager and Roberta can do a good job of that.
Those are attached to the letter that went to BOEM.
Good.
By the
and I suspect that the way things keep going for quite a while, that it's uneconomically feasible to even park a barge full of oil off the Outer Banks right now.
We'll never see any of it anyway.
Yeah, and so that, I mean, that's the emphasis really, is that side of it, not the accident.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you.
Commissioner Demers, you have a committee report.
No, I don't have anything to report.
Okay. Commissioner Cahoon?
I do. I'm happy to report that the pro-business community subcommittee has met. We had very good attendance. There were 3 people that I believe that did not show up. It was met with probably as much enthusiasm as I've seen any committee and citizens when they come to a committee meeting. Lots of roundtable discussion. Staff did a great job. We appreciate their input. We'll probably be having a multitude list of things to come forward to the board with reports as we flesh it out. Committee members have been encouraged to also, as they think about it, send other ideas to staff so that they can disseminate them to the other committee members for discussion at the meetings. We worked on a schedule of meeting every 2 weeks until May, through May, and then go to once a week at least for the summer. But monthly, once a month in the summer. As everybody on there is pretty much business oriented. Mm-hmm. So summertime's busy, but I think the board will be getting some requests for some changes to some things in our ordinances. And we will be trying to work within the confines of the code update and ordinance update so that we're not going to send things forward that might conflict with something that's already in the code or that may be updated in the code. So I had great, it was pretty exciting to see the enthusiasm and participation.
Sounds great. It really does. glad to hear that.
And the other thing, CRC, I'll go ahead and give you that meeting update as well. During the meeting, sandbags were discussed, and the static line was versus development line was discussed, and Nags Head seemed to have been the poster child for all of the different issues. The houses in South Nags Head with all the sandbags throughout were up on the screen throughout the whole discussion of sandbags. And then under the static line, development line, discussion about towns and would be able to choose which one they wanted. Just pointed out why Nags Head probably wouldn't be a good candidate for a development line, given our in and out situation of houses where they're located in that. So we would probably be a candidate to keep the static line until such time as we determine if beach nourishment's working, and would ask for an exception. But that is moving forward, and I think the manager will probably have something else to say about that in his report.
Yes, good.
So thank you very much.
Good, thank you. Commissioner Ratzenberger, you have a submitted report?
Yeah, the YMCA has hired a new executive director, Dana Ensley. Ms. Ensley's current job is executive director of the Greater Cincinnati Y, which is one of those two-state multi-county deals up there, and will be on board 30 March. Our next meeting is 12 March. Dare County Beach Nourishment has got another draft interlocal agreement out amongst the towns for discussion, and our next meeting is the 31st of this month. And the Albemarle Rural Planning Organization, of course, is still dealing with transportation type issues. I have lots to say, but not much to report, so we'll just leave it. Our next meeting is the 15th of April.
Okay, good. Thank you. Our next item is appointment to the planning board. There's one vacancy on the planning board now. And as what I would like to do as usual, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 applicants for the planning board position. I'd like to place all of those names in nomination now. And then ask for any discussion.
Just so you know, Mayor, Ms. Farmer is on the business committee now.
Is now. Okay, good. Very interesting background. Any other discussion?
Just a comment, if I may. Looking at the candidates' characteristics chart and knowing some of the people, it looks like we have some highly qualified, all of them are highly qualified individuals representing different interests and different levels of experience, different age groups, et cetera. So we have a lot of good choices to pick from, and kind of goes to the point of first criteria in my mind is we get a well-qualified person, we have them on here, so the next level of choice is how well does that person fit into the existing board, and what kind of diversity and demographics are they representing. And so in my mind, then that guides me towards my recommendation as to who we should go with, but I'll save that till later.
Okay. I think that's very important, Commissioner Demers, that we, as our policy states, we're striving for diversity on these boards, and that they're represented by all demographic groups in all sections of our town, and that they all be qualified candidates. I'm going to ask all all the candidates are in consideration now, and I ask for your votes on the candidate of your choice. And we'll start with Commissioner Ratzenberger.
Mr. Clark.
Mr. Clark. Commissioner Cahoon.
Kate Murray.
Mayor Pro Tem Walters.
Kate Murray.
Commissioner Damaris.
I would just like to say, I think Mr. Clark is an excellent candidate, but my first choice would be Kate Murray.
And I agree, Mr. Clark is an exceptional candidate. Well, all the candidates are exceptional candidates. I lean towards Kate Murray because we don't have that demographic group really represented on the planning board, and she has some expertise there that would be very useful right now. So I will vote for Kate Murray also. So the new planning board member will be Kate Murray, and we need to determine exactly when her term starts, because the term that she's replacing ended in January.
Right. I think it would start today.
So we need to have a motion of exactly when that term starts.
I make a motion that start today, effective with her acceptance, and that it end at the traditional time that the seat would end.
Motion's been made. Second to the motion?
Second.
Motion been made and second. In discussion. All those in favor of having Ms. Murray's term start effective the day upon her acceptance and end in January 3 years from now? All those, yes, in discussion.
Only question I have is part of our policy somewhere in our long list of policies is that new appointees to boards and committees, or at least to the planning board, have an orientation before the first meeting, but doesn't say who's responsible for that and how that happens, et cetera. Not to spring something on you, but I'm sure the town manager can tell me how that should be working.
The planning board's got a orientation, kind of a, they've got a new chairman and some new members, and the town's attorneys are going to put together an orientation program for March 17th at the first item of business. And I'm sure that Mr. Garman and Mr. Cornwell will acclimate Ms. Murray quickly.
Before that time.
But yes, the whole planning board's going to get a schooling from the town's attorneys.
Schooling.
Sounds like a good plan.
We have a motion on the floor that Ms. Murray's term start effective today with her or upon her acceptance, and it end in January 2018. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, like sign. There being none, so ordered. Next item is request for additional funds for 8th Street survey work.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor, Board. First off, I just wanted to give the board an update of the progress for future improvements to 8th Street. Several months back, I had updated the board about some initial discussions that the town had with the town of Kill Devil Hills about moving forward with proposed improvements not only to East 8th Street but also West 8th Street. This has been something that has been ongoing for the past 10 years between the two townships about improvements due to the fact that that section of the town has deteriorated over time due to some of the additional commercial businesses along that corridor, to include Harris Teeter, the redevelopment of the ABC store, and Rite Aid. So it appears as though all those impediments that have come up over those years have finally been overcome. So at this point, through the many discussions that we've had with the Kill Devil Hills Department of Public Services and the town Department of Public Works, we've come up with a conceptual framework in order to move forward with those improvements. Roberta, if you can go to page 2 of the memo, that we have a broad outline of exactly what has been discussed and how this joint project could move forward. It's been divided into 2 parts, East A Street and West A Street. And basically for East A Street, the town of Kill Devil Hills would take the lead on that project. And some of the key elements to that would be a potential street widening. As it stands right now, it's as narrow as 18 foot, and we would request that that be widened to a minimum of at least 22 foot. We haven't gotten a full commitment from the town of Kill Devil Hills on that, but that's something that we're still working through. As it stands right now, some of the shoulders along that length have been eaten up due to the lack of width within that pavement section, as well as various low areas where water has accumulated over time and has deteriorated the surface of that pavement. The other parts to that would include a asphalt overlay to the entire length of that project, as well as drainage improvements, both on the north side for Kill Devil Hills and on the south side for the town of Nags. The second part would be West A Street, and that's where the town of Nags would take the lead on that. The town of Kill Devil Hills currently has drainage infrastructure along the north side of West A Street, so there are very little improvements associated on their side. But along with widening of portions of A Street, an asphalt overlay, we would look at making drainage improvements along the south side of West A Street in order to address some of the additional impervious coverage that has occurred with the development of those various commercial developments along that corridor. So one, just wanted to pass along what has been discussed so far with the town of Kill Devil Hills. Just wanted to advise the board as how we are looking at proceeding. Would take any comments that you have about this process and this approach. And the second part to this is a request to initiate this process. And the initiation of this process would be with proceeding with surveying services with American Engineering to go ahead and acquire the survey data along this corridor so we could proceed with the design, any associated permitting, as well as the bidding and then the construction for these 2 projects.
Any questions for Dave?
Only one. Is American Engineering, where are they out of?
American Engineering was formerly Eastern, I think it was Eastern Services of Virginia, which is Pete Berkheimer, which provides the engineering and surveying services for the Kill Devil Hills.
Okay, thank you.
And their quote looks like it's about 10% higher than Guayable.
That is correct. And the reason why staff is recommending to utilize them is on the approach on East A Street, that they would be providing the survey data for the town of Kill Devil Hills. If we utilized a separate surveying firm in order to acquire that information, there may be some discrepancies in the information. That would carry over to the design, and that would carry over to the construction. So rather than use 2 separate pieces of information, there may be some additional cost up front, but that will create efficiencies in the end with the end product.
One other question I had, and this is a personal question, is on South Gannett Street. That street is almost impassable now, and I go to Helen's on Saturday morning and get my biscuit and come out that way to get back to 8th Street. That street is almost impassable. Is there any way to include a little bit of resurfacing or something that goes back in there, and it's also, this doesn't show up, but the parking area for RVs and all is back in there, and that street's in miserable shape right now.
Yes, that could be included as part of the project scope. This would be the time to do it, so yes.
I don't want to turn my truck up, just getting my biscuit.
And we have also had conversations with the commercial business back there about redoing their driveway. I know that driveway apron is in pretty bad shape, and we had worked with them in the past about seeing what they could do to improve upon that.
Yeah, that definitely needs to be done.
David, additional question. What type of drainage infrastructure improvements and issues are you anticipating on the south side?
For the east side, I think what we're primarily looking at is the implementation of a vegetated swale conveyance system that would tie back into Memorial Drive, which is one of our main arteries that leads to the Red Drum Ocean outfall, in order to go ahead and give that water somewhere to go. And that's why we had included within the bid some of the side streets to include Memorial, Wrightsville, and I believe it was Aereo Street, in order to provide that connectivity. On the west side, looking at trying to expand what we currently have. That may be vegetative conveyances, that may be pipe conveyances, and then also carry that back to the side streets as well in order to open up those systems, provide more above ground available storage for stormwater runoff.
So we'll be able to decide that better after the survey data is collected.
That is correct.
Pinpoint that.
We've tried to encompass that within the surveying services, so it gives us all that information up front in order to go ahead and make those decisions when we move forward with that design.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Dave? So at this time, we need to approve additional funds for the 8th Street survey work. Is that all that's needed right now, Dave?
That and to authorize the town manager to move forward with contract execution with American Engineering.
So moved.
Moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. That we authorize the town manager to go ahead with the contract work with.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Okay. All right. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, like sign. There being none. We have some. This time we have items referred to in presentations from a town attorney. We're just wondering if the board would like to finish the other items on the agenda before we go into closed session.
Yes.
Do we have consensus on that? We go down to items referred to in presentation from the town manager then.
Okay, briefly, I wanted to remind the board again about, excuse me, Town Hall Day at the North Carolina League of Municipalities is hosting on March the 16th in Raleigh, and we'll be going to visit various members of the legislature. And I wanted to ask, again, I sent an email, but just for input on what type of information we want to convey while we're there. And along those lines, wanted to tell you about two bills that were filed yesterday, actually three. One being House Bill 151, which is property insurance rate making reform. You've probably heard Representative Tyne or read about him bringing this up, and the short title is, well, it's a bill to increase the fairness and equity of the property insurance rate making process by providing for greater transparency regarding the role of catastrophe modeling in property insurance rate filings, by providing that modeled losses in a property rate filing be properly allocated to North Carolina, and by requiring the Rate Bureau to designate in a filing that portion of the rate in which territory allocated to wind and hail. So this is, I don't know how it would be received, but it's certainly a good bill for for us, and we'll be adding, I'm sure after you review this, to the list. Also, let's see, there's another one. It's, well, where is it? I'm sorry, I've got it. The Senate bill that obviously has gotten a lot of discussion in the last week concerning the occupancy tax, and the use of giving Dare County the ability to, by resolution, to apportion a part or all of the occupancy tax towards dredging Oregon Inlet, which was discussed, and some of you made comments. That bill was filed yesterday. It's my understanding that while the section that gives the Dare County Board of Commissioners the authority, Section 3.3, to allocate a portion or all of the occupancy taxes, still in the, or is in the bill that was filed yesterday. That's Senate Bill 160. But from what I understand, the Senator Cook is going to request that that language come out when the bill goes to committee. And again, that's one I think
we need to follow that and make sure that that's done.
That's exactly. And then another one of interest was filed yesterday, House Bill 141. This is stormwater flood control activities. And it is an act to authorize cities to undertake activities within their stormwater management program to implement flood reduction techniques that result in improvements to private property. Which is, again, we just received these today. All three of these were filed yesterday. So I think these are, again, that's House Bill 141, ones that I think we'll want to take a look at. And we'll prepare these and others as talking points when we go to Town Hall Day. Commissioner Cahoon mentioned the at the last CRC meeting, the discussion on the static line. Let me pull that up. Let's see. After that meeting, I believe it was mid-February, the chairman of the CRC requested that there be a subcommittee that was put together to look at the static line. Rudy Rudolph, who's the shoreline manager in Carteret County, is involved in that. And Harry Simmons, who's the executive director of NC Byway, they have requested or invited all of the members as to whether or not they want to be, we would like to be a member of that subcommittee, and we've requested to do so. They have yet to meet. I think that the first meeting may be as part of the NC Byway meeting that's coming up is it 14th and 15th? Monday and Tuesday of March at Pine Knoll Shores. I've asked Andy Garman to represent us.
16th, 17th.
16th, 17th, okay.
It's Monday, Tuesday.
Okay. Andy's going to represent the town on that, and we'll be able to participate on call-in. We won't actually have to physically go to these meetings, but we will be participating in that. And then I wanted to get the board's kind of feedback as to whether you have any interest in the town and the town of Kildover Hills. They requested that we consider some type of joint program for beach driving permits. I understand that they're considering, right now the town of Kildover Hills does not have an ordinance pertaining to beach driving, and there is no cost to beach driving in the town, but they're going to look at doing a program similar to ours, and they've asked what level of reciprocity we would like to consider. I do have some concerns about it. Our program's been in existence for a very long time. Not to overvalue or undervalue our sticker, but I've seen many a bumper that has those stickers, and it could be problematic for the we get a lot of the bait and tackle shops that sell these stickers for us, but it's something that they've asked us to consider just because of once they put a program in place, driving from Kildover Hills across, which they can do now, could get confusing for those that are selling and those that are buying. So I've just looked to see whether or not the board has any interest in some type of joint program where I can go and discuss it with Kildover Hills and then come back and see what we might
Mayor Davies had contacted me just the other day and asked that they would like full reciprocity, that their permits be honored in Nags Head and our permits be honored in Kill Devil Hills is what they would prefer.
Right now, the only thing that I've heard that could be different in the two ordinances, I think they're looking at considering our ordinance exactly except for maybe the speed limit. Our speed limit on our beaches is 25 miles per hour, and I think they're looking at a reduced speed limit.
What's the board's consensus?
I wouldn't mind having the manager discuss it, but I'm not willing to commit to that at this point until we hear a whole lot more information. Because I see a great level of confusion on an enforcement process, as well as enforcement, as well as people that are used to getting it. I just need more information.
So consensus is we'd have Town Manager Ogden discuss it with Kill Devil Hills Town Manager.
That's all I had.
Town Manager Ogden mentioned Town Hall Day. Right now, Town Manager Ogden, Mayor Pro Tem Walters, and I plan to go there. Are there any other commissioners that would like to attend those sessions? We will also, if it's held, I also plan to attend the Tourist Town and Convention Cities Conference, which is the next day if it will be held. That committee has just about collapsed over the years, and Kermit Skinner from Nags Head is now chairman of that committee. He's trying to get it reestablished and reestablish their work and their goals and so forth. So we set in on that during the annual meeting, and that came out of the annual meeting. So I will plan on attending that meeting, which is the morning of the 18th, I think it is.
19th.
Anything else for our town manager?
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Cahoon, you've got a couple items you want to bring up?
When we adopted our stormwater ordinance and it dealt with fill, we said there had to be an engineered stormwater solution if you were going to use fill. There seems to be some consternation out in the community as to when those devices have to be put in, because people are getting permits to fill lots. They're flooding the adjacent properties because evidently we're not requiring that those elements be put in until the project is over. And in the meantime, you've got 6 months of construction that is creating that impact. And the question is, if you passed an ordinance, why aren't you making people do something, even if it's temporary swales, to stop the flooding that is occurring on adjacent properties?
I don't think the committee anticipated that the developers would do something harmful like that, that it would only make sense to do things in the right order. So having that loophole there is not a good thing, and I think we should take a look at closing the loophole.
Yeah, because there's people that are asking, do they have any ability to come after the town for damages to their property by us not enforcing our ordinances?
There may or may not be an action for damages, but they certainly have the ability to pursue a claim for an order requiring the town to enforce its ordinances. The town may have immunity from a damage claim, but you don't have immunity from a claim compelling you to enforce the ordinance.
Well, I
think the way our stormwater ordinance was written, and the structures that we wanted to put in place, almost impossible to put in place until the final grading on the job is done. Now, that doesn't mean that we let water run all over the place in the meantime. I think we should enforce, as we do with sand fences, that enforce that diking and whatever other control are necessary to keep storm water from running on the adjacent property, all be in place during construction. And I'm not sure we have that in an ordinance in place.
and I'm not sure either, and maybe somebody else here does, but I do think that we have a requirement that all of this be done before certificate of occupancy, which kind of puts a reasonableness time frame on it, but at the same time, it may not seem reasonable to the neighbor that gets 3 or 4 rainfalls in a row and sees a lot of erosion. So we may need to look at strengthening that portion.
It's not just the rainwater, it's also their fill is running onto everybody else's property. And are they gonna go in and remediate the fill off of the adjoining property?
As I understand, the fill is running as a result of stormwater. Is that correct? Yeah.
Andy, do we have anything in our ordinances now that we can enforce that? I know we enforce the sand fencing part, which is we're addressing blowing sand, but do we have anything in our ordinances now that would address?
We do have the erosion control provisions which we require, but we have not typically required the installation of these improvements at the beginning of a project when the fill is first placed. I'd have to go back and look at the ordinance to see if, based on the existing language, we feel like we could require that up front. Certainly something that we could add to the ordinance if we feel like the current language is insufficient to require it. But maybe the town and Dave Ryan can address
these permanent structures that we're asking for almost
maybe
will be almost impossible to be effectively put in place until the final grading of the project in most cases, but we definitely need to have controls in the meantime.
Right, and I think that could be defined under sediment and erosion control. I think the language that is currently in the ordinance mirrors that of the state, and the state requirements at a minimum indicate silt fence along the limits of disturbance, as well as sediment transport, which it would fall under if fill is running off the site onto adjoining property, then yes, it could fall under the provisions of sediment and erosion control. So I think we've got some mechanisms. We'll go back, we'll take a look at them and see if they need to be strengthened at all.
Just for edification, people that have experienced this issue, do you know if they've gone and asked the town if there is something enforceable, or have they just brought the issue to you and that's the path it's going?
They brought it to me and I'm bringing it forward.
Right. So there may in fact already be enforceable ordinances there, but it just hasn't been brought to the town as a site-specific problem.
I've not gotten answers overall, except at the end. The answer I've gotten has been, we've talked about it, kind of is those things happen at the end, and there seems to be no solution for what happens during the building process with all the field.
Sounds like we just need to clarify erosion control procedures and make sure that those processes are in place during construction. And that part of the ordinance should handle that.
And I have one other that it relates to that. As we allow the fill and as people put in their pools, where are they going to pump the water from as they sink the pool?
We did include a provision within the stormwater ordinance last year. I think it's section 3411, which talks about discharge not only of swimming pool water, hot tub water, but also groundwater, and that should be retained on site unless the town explicitly gives them or authorizes them to discharge that within the right-of-ways. And I think NCDOT was included in that as well.
So they could theoretically pump the water from a pool into the right-of-way, which would then go on to adjoining property owners as well.
Well, that would be, I believe that it was, authorization would have to be given by the town manager, the stormwater administrator, or the town engineer to permit that to happen.
I can't think of many examples where the infrastructure in the right-of-way could handle it without the threat of trespassing onto other property. But it's possible, but not.
It's a curiosity question because as I've watched projects develop on these narrow lots that are allowing fill, they're either going to dump it to the north, to the south, and the right-of-way, which can impact both north and south, depending on where you're situated, or east-west, depending on where the lot's located.
And I think it's spelled out in 4 different provisions. For your specific situation, I think that the language indicates that that water has to be retained on site. And yes, I believe that's 3411A, I believe spells that out, about that there shall be no off-site discharges to include groundwater if there were dewatering activities to take place.
Which raises my question, if they're not retaining their stormwater now on site because nothing's been put in, how do you retain the pumping out of a area to cover a swimming pool to be retained on site?
I don't think you can. I mean, unless you make some development to to contain it. I don't think you can.
I guess we're going around in circles, but if we've got a situation where the stormwater's not staying there, how do we expect the volume of water from a hole big enough to contain a swimming pool to stay on site?
Well, if the requirement is there for them to retain it on site, it's up to them to figure out how to retain it, not up to us. So if they can't figure out how to do it, then maybe they can't put in a pool.
And if it comes to the town's attention that they are discharging it off-site and it is leading to negative impacts on adjoining properties, I think that there's also a mechanism in there for the town to issue a notice of violation to that contractor or property owner at that time.
So we have the ordinances in place, it's a matter of enforcing those ordinances.
That's correct.
I mean, the only thing else I can say about it is that there's the requirement puts the burden on the contractor to not discharge water. I don't think there's anything in the ordinance that requires them to present a plan for where the water's going to be discharged during a groundwater lowering operation. You know, I mean, that would probably be the next step if you wanted to do that, is to say, okay, well, when you submit your stormwater plan, I see you're putting in a pool here. Now you need to show me where you're going to discharge the water when you go to install the pool. And then they would have to come up with some sort of specific way to show us how they're going to do it. We've dealt with a situation recently where we presented that to the contractor and said, you know, you can't discharge on adjacent property owners, and he basically says, I know, and I'm not going to. But he doesn't say anything more than that. So unless we require a specific plan, that's probably the answer we're going to get. And then it's up to us to find out, you know, or get a complaint that it's being done.
Could you require that as part of the erosion control plan? I know in other localities that I worked in hilly country, you had to have part of the erosion control plan. You had to have control of runoff from the site. And, you know, that was hay bales and a lot of other retaining structures to keep and ponds and so forth to keep all of the stormwater on site. Can we require that as part of our erosion control plan under current ordinances?
We would have to take a look at that. I mean, I think it's a combination of things that we would need to do. And we'll need to take a look at our ordinance and see what else we might need to add to strengthen it. And the planning board is actually getting ready to have a discussion related to the stormwater ordinance at their next meeting. We could possibly build this into that discussion. And then we would also need to look at our current enforcement practices to see what else we need to do at this time to address this particular issue based on what we already have in place. Right. So I think there's a variety of ways we could approach it. I think that Commissioner Cahoon is right. We typically, at this point in time, we've only been enforcing the installation of the stormwater improvements at the end of the job. We have not required any interim measures when they place the fill other than the erosion control fencing. So, I mean, it's all new. So it's just something additional that we need to try and take a look at.
All that goes back to the initial erosion control plan. You've got sand fencing, so it all goes back to that same erosion control plan, and that can be entirely different from what we end up as stormwater control measures on the final project.
Right. You know, and I mean, I think that when they get started, you know, they want to build the house. Stormwater measures are an afterthought in most cases. Yeah. So, you know, when they go to place the fill, maybe they need to do some initial grading and shaping, to at least make sure it's not running directly on the adjacent property rather than just going in and doing it at the end.
Well, that's bad, yeah. A lot of that is diking, a lot of it is control measures like straw bales and things like that to keep all the fill dirt on site.
One other question. Dave mentioned the NOV. Don't you have a certain number of days to remediate an NOV? So an NOV technically doesn't really do anything to stop it because they have X number of days. Is that right?
Yeah, it has to be some sort of reasonable time frame, you know.
So they can get through with it and then say, oh, we're done.
Or they can appeal it. Right? I mean, didn't that stay the NOV? If they were to appeal the notice of violation pertaining to stormwater?
Stays the enforceability.
Right.
Doesn't stay the running of.
Right. But I mean, effectively, once.
So in other words, they would have to go get a court order to demand that the town stop the.
It probably wouldn't be worth it for that.
Well, alternatively, they could go and get a court order just prohibiting the trespass. It's a trespass. The complaining landowner can complain of a trespass committed by the adjoining landowner. They can just sue them directly.
Yeah, I did. I knew there were civil issues, but it seems to me we have great gaps in our stormwater and fill ordinance for damage.
I'd like to suggest that we ask staff to address these valid questions coming from citizens in both the stormwater chapter and in soil and sedimentation control portions of the ordinance, and come back and advise us on the adequacy or shortcomings in both those areas. And similarly, if there are shortcomings, what direction staff and planning board may take to resolve those.
And part of it has been my observation. It hasn't always come from the property owners. It's been me seeing what in the world is going on as I'm out and about.
Absentee property owner doesn't know that he's just been flooded out or something. I'd like to fast track this. I mean, this is one of these things that, I'm sorry, I don't trust people to do the right thing. It's easier to. And I think we need to take a look to see, A, do we have any holes? And fix them, not in this, take a look and bring it back. And, 3 months, 6 months down the pike, we're still dealing with them as it's going through things. Let's take a look and see if we have holes. But number two, it also sounds that if we don't have holes, or if we already have things, we need to put the word out to ourselves and all the citizens that if you see this kind of stuff, and please, dial us, and we will come down and get it. Because a lot of times the citizens, people will complain about things not knowing that in fact it's already covered.
I just have a question. How long or how much time does staff need to look at the erosion and sediment control and bring recommendations back to us?
Does the board want the recommendations to come back here, or do you want it to go through planning board? It's going to take longer if it comes back here, then goes back to planning board.
It really needs to go back. It really needs to go to the planning board and then bring it back to this board as rapidly as possible. See if there are holes in that. I think we need to look. It's not in the stormwater ordinance. I think it's in the erosion control ordinances and policies, and make sure we've got this during construction phase covered there. I think that's where it needs to be covered.
We'll start addressing some of the stuff right away with our internal procedures, as far as when we look at stormwater plans, what we ask them to do in the beginning and through the process.
And bring this back through, if there are holes in that erosion control plan, that would handle a specific case, and get those planning board, get them fixed and bring them back to us as rapidly as possible would be my recommendation.
And I agree with that, and I also align with Commissioner Ratzenberger. Could we get a quick email mini report on what your findings are, whether there are holes or not holes, not the solution, but what your assessment is?
Sure.
We can update the board as soon as we have that.
That way we can respond appropriately.
Let's do it.
Yeah, I guess my advice is going to tell them to get a court order to prevent trespass.
Westward migration of sand.
We're having the same issue this year that we had last year. That sand's not staying in the sandbox. It's definitely coming over, and some of it, in some cases, is coming over to the point where it cannot be put back on the beach to meet the slopes. So what do we tell people about all this excess sand?
We've had a lot of discussion about this, and Todd Kraft has visited very many sites. If it's, we have places that sand can go back. You know, we have places places all throughout town. The difficulty and the problem for us is getting it there, getting it from the private property to these locations. Seagull, some of the dead-end streets down in South Nags Head, where we can put sand and push it back out on the beach. It's supposed to stay. Well, it has to stay in the area what am I?
V zone.
V zone. Right. It has to stay in the V zone. So we've heard cases of it, you know, going off site. That ain't supposed to happen. We can work as best as we possibly can individually with the property owners to try and find a location for it. I think some places have had to leave it in what would be their front yard. Ideally, obviously, we all want it to be back out on the beach. I think you're absolutely right. The problem's as bad this year, if not worse than it was last year. I think we're hearing from folks that we didn't hear from last year. So, but as far as a townwide effort to manage getting that sand back out on the beach, that's going to be very difficult for us. To go on private property and time it so that they have somebody there to load it, and then, you know, with our trucks, we would have to schedule that time because those trucks are going to be on a job site somewhere else. It pains me to say this, but there are, you know, I know it costs a lot of money for these property owners to get this sand.
Twice. Paying for the MSD and now paying to remove it.
That is another alternative, is to contact somebody to haul it, and then we can work with them on where to put it.
Yeah, because nobody wants a CAMA violation for putting too much sand back and then you can't grade it to the slope appropriately.
For our standpoint, it's the simplest way to do that is to communicate to the property owner that they can bring it to a site that we determine.
So do we designate?
Are you finished?
I'm done.
Okay.
I'm done.
I was going to ask where we are on like sand fencing, our sand fencing program, and the possibility of sprigging, and is there anything we can do to help mitigate the movement of the sand?
Stop the wind blowing.
Yes, we have put out that project to bid, which is a balance between sand fencing and sprigging, and we are going to receive those bids here this coming Friday. And then as soon as we receive those bids, turn that contract around to go ahead and get those improvements in place as soon as possible.
And how much is allotted for that?
90,000.
There is money in the MSD, that the shared revenues that's accumulated, and it's enough money to address part of what we've talked about. And maybe there's a way that we use some of that money to help the property owner to defray some of that cost of getting the sand back out on the beach.
It seems like that's the goal. If we want to keep it on the beach, then.
Is it a possibility that we could enter into a contract with a contract hauler to do that the property owners could, we pay for the, is there enough money there we pay for the hauling and let the property owners pay for the removal?
It could be similar to what we do with the sand fence, or what we have done with the sand fence with the accumulation of the interest from the fund that we, we set aside an amount of money, and it's, we can somehow distribute those funds to accomplish the process. It's hard for me to tell you how much money you would spend doing that.
Right. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
What area or what length of beach are you sand fencing and sprigging?
As far as the sand fencing, it's primarily from Forest Street all the way down to East Oregon. It's about 4.5 miles. And then the sprigging is going to be concentrated in the southern part of South Old Oregon Inlet Road. I think we've got about 1.5 miles of sprigging that we're looking at. So based upon the information that we received from Tim Kana and some of the other resources that we had, we were trying to find that balance, look at those areas where we had the highest concentration of sand removal last year, and also ground truth it by driving the beach this year to kind of see where those problem areas are, and those were the areas that we targeted. So the sand fencing primarily is to keep it more on the oceanward side, try to establish a linear or straight dune line, and then the sprigging would go ahead and support some of those areas in order to try to stabilize that dune structure and prohibit or prevent the western migration of sand.
Is the board interested in us exploring how we would, the cost of partnering with the private property owners to pay for the cost of getting that sand back? I think we'd have to go and get bids from local folks that can haul and somehow get a per unit, per haul cost. We can either set aside a certain amount of money, or we can just.
I think we probably have to set it aside as a certain amount of money, a designated fund, and when that runs out, then it runs out.
And it could be up to a dollar amount per property, and then it gives us a little bit. That helps, but it also helps us kind of define how much money we're talking about.
Well, that's kind of the short-term
Right.
fix. It seems like the long-term fix would be to do the sprigging for a greater area
Correct.
that's affected and the fencing as a preventative measure instead of,
Are we required to do the sprigging as part of our exception to our beach nourishment permit last year? Wasn't that part of the,
Yes, that was part of the Phase 2 work, that's correct.
and it didn't specify, it only specified that we do,
No, it just allowed us to determine where that sprigging would go.
Right, we didn't give specific locations as to exactly where that would occur.
We're permitted throughout the entirety of the project.
That's correct.
my only concern is we better be careful about agreeing to stuff and then we only do little bits and pieces. Otherwise, we probably won't get exceptions to our permit anymore.
Right.
Because there's a great deal of comment going backward to CAMA as well about this migration, and if we agree to sprigging and we only do this little bit, I don't think they're going to be happy with, we only did just enough to satisfy, but you didn't really address the conditions, the entire length of the permit exception.
And I think just because of the funds available, we were trying to address the highest concentration of the problem areas that we saw last year.
Yeah, because there are multiple issues in that addressing. It's just, as the most recent report shows, we've got numerous problems of things too far to the east, things too far to the west, things in the right place, and people whose views are encumbered by dunes and want to take them out so they can see what's happening. And that's kind of what the maintenance phase, we want to address that holistically and try to. I don't know how to solve the immediate problems, and I hate to see us spend too much of the money we have accumulated, given that we're not all sure how much we'll ever have again on these immediate issues, but we do need to do something now, at least to help get sand away. I mean, I looked at a place with our HVAC buried, this and that. And we also have a problem that's been there since Isabel at the end of our own streets, where we lost a chunk of stuff. And what used to be not a town access, but it was the end of a street. It was a private access, even a deeded access with the community's own little set of stairs and all that. Those things are gone. And what we have is a street that quit right here, where there used to be infrastructure and it was all managed, and now it's sand building up to the two surviving houses, one on each side. And as it keeps coming back down the street, it's almost the point of covering over where their side driveways are coming in. And somewhere in this, we need an overall policy of how we're going to deal with these streets. And it would be nice if some point later on we could formalize these things and turn them into real accesses, not box canyons, which is what they are right now, that you can't get up and over. So I don't know, but there's a whole bunch of issues there. But I have been up and down. I've had several calls, and several people have had me up and down on their properties. I'm just waiting for Gary Oliver to come back from wherever he is and look in the parking lot at the pier.
The sand is almost
Looked at that Sunday.
to the pump house of the Jeanette's Pier. And it's as tall as the pump house right now. Just to give you a reference point. Yes, he does.
So,
May I make a motion just to authorize the manager and staff to look at options for everything that's been discussed? The short-term sand removal, the possibility of fencing and sprigging a greater distance. Is that too broad?
No. I mean, we have the bids, we can multiply what he's doing townwide and get a cost for that. We can, based on the information that Todd and planning has on they can try and get an estimate for how much sand we're talking about at these sites that we've visited thus far, and if we are to contribute to relocating some of this sand, how we'd go about doing that and what we think the cost would be. Time's running out for this year.
I think before we can make a decision, we kind of need that.
I don't know if we need a motion or just consensus, but,
Go ahead and make a motion.
okay,
I second that motion.
thank you.
Okay, you want to restate the motion?
I'd like to make a motion to authorize the mayor and his staff to bring back options and cost related to sand removal and sprigging and fencing.
Did you say manager or mayor?
I'm manager.
Manager, okay.
Sorry.
I thought so. I didn't figure you wanted to be involved in that.
Okay, any discussion?
I think that's a great motion, and I think it's particularly critical because the cost piece of it is going to be very important. This could easily run amok. We don't have extra money to just pay for everything that we would like to pay for, and if we pay for this, it's going to come out of something else. And so it's going to be a tough decision. There's a lot of sand out there, just as it was before beach nourishment. There was a lot of erosion out there, and the town didn't take on the responsibility of dealing with the erosion other than to come up with the beach nourishment, which was great. Now we've got kind of a reverse problem. How do we do that? Is it a town-wide problem or property owner problem? What is there an intermediate position to take in there? So I think the motion is great, and we need to look at that carefully.
If I can just add, if we want to supplement what we've already identified for sprigging for this year, we're going to have to move pretty fast because April 15th is really the window to go ahead and get that sprigging in place in order if we want to go ahead and do that this year. If we want to do it in subsequent years, then the timing's not as critical, but we'll have to move pretty rapidly if we want to include that as a supplement to what we've already identified this year.
When does the sprigging window start? Next year, when would we start?
I believe it starts around the October-November timeframe.
So we could maybe catch next year. I mean, I don't.
yeah, sprigging's a long-term solution.
Right.
I mean, the big problem is sand in the doorway. Sprigging is not going to fix the sand that's already in the doorway.
And sprigging too, it's going to take a little time to mature and establish. So that's why we were trying to find a balance with sand fencing. Sand fencing has a higher capture rate up front. And so that's why we were looking at trying to find the balance between the two and try to retain as much of that sand on the oceanward side.
Okay. Any further discussion?
Just a comment, just general information. Before nourishment, we had a little bitty beach. The sand was mostly wet, so when the wind blew, it didn't go anywhere. Now we have a wide beach. The sand is mostly dry, and when the wind blows, it picks it up and blows it west. The wet sand stays here. The heavier grains fall out as it goes. And what ends up over here is a lot more sand because more of it can blow, and there's a wider area of stuff to blow. And it's also the finer grain because that's what stays up in the wind when it blows. So we didn't put finer grain sand in the nourishment project. It's the same old sand. It's just totally different characteristics of what blows back and forth. So part of this is just an explanation of why we've got so much sand back there.
And to piggyback on that, according to CSC, it only takes 15 miles per hour for a grain of sand to start to blow and migrate westward. Several weeks back, we had winds upward of 60 miles an hour blowing out of the northeast. I had traveled the beach the day prior to. There wasn't the magnitude of sand accumulation until that wind had come through and blown all that sand up there. And it was a significant amount, just as some of the commissioners have noted here in the southern portion of town. So it's significant, and it can only take one event for that to occur.
And we've got a motion on the floor. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, like sign. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
We've got what we need to do. We need to go into closed session. You know, you want it to break for lunch since we're going to be back here at 2 o'clock anyway.
Are we going to finish L, or what are we doing here?
We're finishing the L. Okay. I didn't have anything else listed on the L, but if other commissioners have an agenda, it's time to handle that now.
No, I'll save it. I'll just
Save it. Any others? Okay. How would you like to break now and come back into closed session? I'll have closed session now.
I lean towards closed session now.
Just soon drive on.
Okay.
We got.
All right. Mr. Lady, we need a motion to go into closed session, please.
Yes, sir. We need a motion to enter closed session pursuant to General Statute 143-318.11A3 in order to discuss the sand soda litigation and to confer with the town attorney and preserve the attorney-client privilege.
I have a motion to that effect.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Not all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, like sign. So ordered. Nags Head Board of Commissioners back in session. Open session. Mr. Lighty, would you give a report from the closed session, please?
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. The board did discuss the sand soda litigation as well as confer with the town attorney on a matter within the attorney-client privilege, but no actions were taken.
Okay, thank you very much. One thing we need to talk about is our mid-month meeting. And it looks like, I'm not sure we will need one yet, but if we do, we will need to change the date because that's the day of the town hall meeting in Raleigh, the 18th.
I don't believe we'll be back from Raleigh in time.
No.
Let's not have one.
We'll be staying over the next day on the Resort Towns Conference also.
Right.
Let's, well, I would be in agreement not to have one. There was just one item that might come up, but I'm not sure that would come up. We have to have a meeting, we can call a meeting. Is everybody in agreement to that?
If we need one, we'll have one.
Cliff, do we have anything that you know of coming up that we need to have mid-month for?
Yes, sir.
If we need one, we will call a meeting.
Could we, I mean, since it's close enough, we could piggyback formally announcing, of course, on the CIP workshop, which is already scheduled.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
So we could just, you know, we could put it on.
Right. Any other business to be brought before the board? If not, we'll recess till 3 o'clock to the Cotton Ridge Rehab Center for Public Forum. Have a motion to recess till 3 o'clock.
You can just declare it, Mayor.
Declare.
You can just declare
Okay,
recess.
we're recessing until 3 o'clock.
Good.